It was a nice spring break.
That's right. And a beautiful day today.
Hi, Nancy. Hi,
Hi,
Ann.
Deborah. How was Texas?
It was nice. It was really good weather. We were really lucky.
Good time of year.
So, did you all have a nice break? How's your husband?
He's hanging in there. He's doing okay.
Okay.
We're still within the first few days, so but he's walking unassisted.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And Karen will not be able to be with us tonight. She's traveling. Oh, here's our superintendent. I think we can start then. Yep. This regular business meeting of the Edmond School District Board of Directors for April 13th, 2021 is called to order. Dr. Balderas, would you please administer the land acknowledgement?
Yes, love to. Thank you, board members, for being here tonight. And we acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people and their successors, the Tulalip tribes who since time immemorial have taken care of, hunted, fished, and gathered on these lands. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. By acknowledging these homelands, we commit to working with tribal nations to further the education aims they have identified in our classrooms and our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have our flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next, we have the agenda. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the agenda?
This is Ann. Move to approve.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion passes. And I think that I'll I made the comment, Director Chase is not with us tonight, but we still have quorum, just for the record. Next, we have to consider the school board minutes for March 23rd, our business meeting on March 23rd. Is there a motion?
I move to
move to-
approve the minutes for March 23rd, 2021.
I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes for March 23rd, 2021. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes for March 23rd, 2021, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? And the motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next, we have our public comments for the evening. The public comment item on the agenda is an opportunity for citizens to address the school board. Items brought forward during this portion of the agenda will not be acted upon by the board at this time. Questions may also be referred to the superintendent or staff for examination and later response. Because of COVID-19 and the pandemic closure, the board will accept written comments until further notice. And we just have a couple of comments tonight. I would wonder if one of my esteemed colleagues would be interested in reading them.
This is
I'm
Ann.
willing.
Oh, go
You
ahead,
go,
Nancy.
Ann. No, I did it last time. You're,
Okay,
go
gotcha.
ahead.
Okay, we've got, I think, from what I've got, I think we have two comments. The first one is from Aaron Holder. It's regarding district use of data and school reopening. And he says, I continue to be concerned about the forward momentum of the district. As a community, we seem happy to make commitments and set priorities, but don't follow through with reflection and accountability to hold ourselves responsible or make sure we are achieving our stated goals. Our actions give our words substance. I see this thread running through many aspects of our district, from the messaging around moving 6th grade to middle school to the lack of systemic support for staff around teaching BLM. More recently, in the messaging to educators on the requirement to cover every standard before the end of the school year, despite the unprecedented year, recent changes to classes, and remaining instruction time, and the need to address the mental health and emotional well-being emergency that led to the governor's mandate in the first place. More immediately concerning, I see it running through our final 11 weeks. We spent months talking about which of our students have been hardest hit by this last year and our responsibility to provide them with the support they need to be both academically successful and feel connected and valued. I understand that Governor Inslee's mandate was unexpected and required immediate attention in order to implement. However, as was stated multiple times by multiple people, from teachers to district admin to OSPI and our governor, only reopening schools is not enough. There are students in my class that I identified for our school hub that did not opt in to hybrid learning. They are still struggling and still need our support. We have the data to identify these students. We know the demographics of which students picked hybrid and which students picked remote. We have the panorama data that identifies the emotional well-being of individual students. Schools were using this data, as well as surveys from teachers, to identify students for hubs before the mandate. We should be using this data to identify the students that we have missed and provide support at a systems level. It is an important part of our school reopening. Our actions give our words substance. And then I have a second comment from a David Phippen. It's on the robotics practice field. He says, my name is David Phippen, and I have lived in the district for the past 30 plus years. I have volunteered at various district schools, including Oak Heights, Maplewood, Mount Lake Terrace High School, and Linwood High School, mostly as a quote, first robotics, unquote, mentor and coach. My comments today are in regard to your canceling the use of the robotics practice field at former Alderwood Middle School. I have shared the use of the auxiliary gym facility previously when the school was utilized during capital projects, and there are many advantages to allow this shared use again. First Robotics is a quote, sport of the mind, unquote, and as such, we need a practice facility just like athletic programs. A practice field used after school hours is allowed for athletic programs. Why not robotics? The district has already made an investment to create this great practice field. And then in parentheses, $18,080 from their capital partnership program to pay 65% of the Andy Mark Field perimeter and the remaining funds from a community member. This high quality field perimeter provides a safe venue for the general public and younger students to watch robotics. We were planning to have some demonstration events for our community, but COVID shut things down. Third point, we have had 20 other FIRST Robotics teams come practice with our team. This helped our team tremendously, and we ranked 4th in the only competition we could play in March 2020. However, the major benefit from having other teams is the support our students and mentors experience from the community of FIRST. We learned so much from each other on that practice field, not just robotics. As a community college professor, I see where this program takes students. It opens doors and gives students confidence to seek, open, and go through those doors. A practice field facility is vital for the future success of this program. Hundreds of volunteer hours go into supporting the students, and I ask that you could reconsider the shared use of the former Alderwood Middle School space. Thank you. And I don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Anne. Next, we have our consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
This is Anne, I second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda for this evening. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadam,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye. And the motion passes and the consent agenda is approved. Next, we have our reports, and the first up is our reentry update.
Thank you. If I can pull the PowerPoint up, please. For the reentry, sorry. As that gets pulled up, first of all, I just want to maybe start off by acknowledging all the work that everyone did to make this week happen. We have another busy week next week from teaching staff that I know worked a lot during spring break to get ready for the 3 through 6 coming back on campus, as well as I know secondary that are getting ready for next week, to building principals, to all the custodial staff, all the support staff, to drivers, to make this happen this week. We were able to bring in our K through 6 kids in, all elementary kids in this year, this past Monday, which is yesterday, but it's just great to see the kids up and around the campuses, and I really appreciate the support that everyone provided to help with the attestation process at the beginning of the day to get the kids onto our campuses. So I want to just first of all just acknowledge the heavy lift that took place, as one of the public comments stated. There was a lot of work to be done in short order, and we still have our and people are doing a lot of heavy work right now to get ready for secondary as well, where we have our secondary kids coming in. So, just checking on the PowerPoint.
Coming right up, sir.
Thank you, Cheryl. But again, it was fun to see, and also we're very fortunate to have a really good week of weather. So it's good to see the kids outside, even on the playground, and the sports teams that are continuing to practice. Some of the comments that I'll make just as we wait for the PowerPoint have to do with the work that was done on a staffing front, and or maybe I'll just wait till we get to that part of the PowerPoint. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. Can I go to the next slide, please? Again, right now, our current status is stage 3, which is again the stage that we'll be in for the remainder of the year. And as we look forward to continuing to work on what the fall will look like back on our campuses. I know that's something that we still need to work with our associations regarding what that will look like in the future, and also the ever-changing guidance that comes out from the Department of Health as more and more information gets changed by as more data and more information comes in from the CDC and the Department of Health. I was on a call today. I know that right now they're regarding vaccinations. I know that's also another slide that we're looking at. It's something that we're hopeful that there'll be a vaccine for our 12 years plus students. But again, there is also a strong worry because of the way that this vaccine is being approved, that there'll be a strong need for a full remote option for many kids next year. But again, right now our current status is stage 3. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to have staff take over on this one if I could. I'm going to ask Helen, Victor, or Dana to really work on stage 2 since you were heavily involved in it.
Sure, I'll jump in here. Yes, so stage 2 is our kindergarten through 2nd grade students, and that's obviously fully underway. We started out on March 22nd, the 2nd graders started, and then the week of March 29th, our kinders and 1st grade students began. So they are the experts as we entered into 3-6. They were able to show the older kids how it's done as they enter the buildings this week. So that's been fantastic. Just some percentages there for stage 2 in person. 65% of our students district-wide chose in person, and 35% of our students chose the remote option. And next slide. And just some amazing pictures of our kids. I'll tell you what, I was out at some buildings yesterday and today, and I know everybody else on the screen was too, and just our kids' ability to do all of the measures, the mitigation strategies. They're wearing masks, they're staying distance, they're doing a fantastic job of washing their hands. All of those pieces, our kids are just what's right about all of this effort, and they're doing a fantastic job. Even our littlest, I walked a 3-year-old into AECC preschool, had his mask on the whole time, walked in like a champ. So it was really great to be with kids and see their faces and see them on campus. Next slide. And stage 3 started yesterday. Sorry, Gustavo, it does feel like it was just Mondays ran into Tuesday a little bit. And it's our 3rd through 6th grade students. We have had a number of staff members out helping with the attestation process, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. And again, about that 65 to 35% in person versus remote. And we are an AB fully hybrid model and fully rolling at the elementary level and with some of our preschool students as well. And next slide. I think this is just the visual representation that you've seen before as we run it in front of you. We have our A group, our B group, and our C group is the fully remote group. And then, and that A group is the Monday, Thursday. Our B group is that Tuesday, Friday group. Next slide.
Yes, Greg Schwab to speak to
Yeah.
this, if he could possibly. Greg, if you could jump in here.
Trying to get unmuted here.
No.
So at secondary, we're putting the finishing touches this week on getting ready for the return of students in grades 7 through 12, starting on April 19th. And we have the following schools that have adopted the 3-period block schedule: Edmonds, Woodway, Meadowdale High School, College Place Middle School, Meadowdale Middle School, and Scriber Lake High School. And then the schools that have opted for a 6-period schedule are Mountain Terrace, Linwood High Schools, Alderwood Middle School, and Briar Terrace Middle School. Just a quick reminder about the secondary student day. The middle school student day will be from 8:10 to 2:10 p.m. and the high school day will be 7:20 a.m. to 1:20 p.m. Our e-learning program will continue to operate as quote unquote normal. Remember, they have been they are the experts on remote learning. They've been doing it before it was cool, but they have the opportunity for students to, they will have opportunity for students to access the lab for in-person support as well at College Place Middle School. And just a quick update, a little bit of data on our secondary students. Our 67% of our students have opted for in-person learning for the remaining 10 weeks of the school year. And right now we're continuing to work on addressing some staffing needs for those classrooms where the teacher is fully remote, but the students are in person. I was working with principals today to address some of those remaining classrooms that still need to be supervised for the kids that are going to show up in person but have a remote teacher. And if I could go to the next slide, please. Just a quick reminder about the secondary schedule. We're using the concurrent A/B hybrid model with live stream and in-person instruction being concurrently taught to limit the student and staff schedule changes that would have had to result if we tried to do a different model. So that's a little bit about the secondary work. And so I think at this point, we're going to go on to the attestation process.
Yes, we'll hit on this pretty quickly. So all of our students and staff, before they enter the buildings, are doing the attestation through Qualtrics, as we've talked about before. The majority of our families are using the digital platform and the digital attestation with good success. We provided a menu of tools to our buildings and really allowed them some versatility in how the attestation process would go, the physical landscape of their building and the entrance, and all the buildings are just a little bit unique in how kids enter. So, and our buildings have done a fantastic job utilizing the resources they have and then using the technology tools that our incredible technology department has provided them. Qualtrics offers the digital attestation in our top 8 languages, and that will be increased to our top 10 very soon. That's an example of the drop-down menu of the Qualtrics attestation. The top 14 languages are available for each school in the paper format. So if families come and have not completed the digital attestation form, they're offered a paper attestation form and able to do it right then and there. And so we did the top 14 languages because then it represented the top 3 languages in each of our buildings to encompass as many as possible. And then we are also reviewing the possibility of implementing the Qualtrics for contact tracing. So when someone fills out the Qualtrics attestation, there's also the option with the company to add in, so if I do have symptoms and possibly, and then I'm COVID positive, I could do my contact tracing. I could list the people that I spent closer than 6 feet, more than 15 minutes. We aren't doing that yet. It's just a possibility that we're researching because the contact tracing part when there is a COVID positive is really, really time consuming, and this might help cut into that time a little bit. So that's kind of something that's up and coming. Next slide, please. Greg and I tag team this slide just a little bit. We wanted to touch base on some mental health supports that are out there right now for our students and our staff. We did a psychological first aid refresher for all staff on February 24th. We talked about that previously. And with stage 2 and stage 3 coming in, our secondary school counselors and our school psychologists at the secondary level are in person, and many of our elementary school psychologists are in person, which offers an incredible resource for our kids. And then I think Greg was going to talk about this next component.
Yeah. So as part of the schedule at secondary, we have built in designated advisory time. So every school has time dedicated to an advisory period. We felt like this was really important to have as part of our schedule because this is the first time in a year that many of our students, well, all of our students will be back into some kind of in-person learning. And so we felt like we needed to really make sure that we had a period of time each day where we were able to do some social emotional learning. So we have assembled a team comprised of student learning staff, our coordinator for secondary counselors, and our student services department, all working together to create weekly SEL lesson plans that'll be delivered in the advisories for the remainder of the school year. These lessons are going to continue to focus on psychological first aid. And again, our goal really here is to create that opportunity for warm welcome and for students to re-engage in school and build a sense of connectedness as we wrap up the school year.
And then lastly, on the CareSolis, we've talked about the contract with CareSolis. That is like that linkage to mental health resources. We already have 205 referrals from CareSolis. So CareSolis has already been accessed 205 times to link our families or our students to mental health providers. So that's really exciting. It's something that's new for us. And I see that as increasing as our kids get back to school and learn more about that resource. All right, next slide. Oh, Gary.
Yeah, I had a question about the attestation and how it actually works in person. Kind of two questions. One, what happens if a kid in an elementary school gets off the bus and walks up and doesn't have a form? And the second one is more globally, how do you match some in an elementary school, some 300 or 400 kids with 300 or 400 attestation forms, and make sure each kid as they walk in has that completed? And even more globally, how do you do that with 800 students walking into a high school all at the same time? How do you know each one of them has already done this form correctly?
Well, Director Noble, that was the $1 million question going into getting kids back in person. So our buildings have done a lot of pre-work on this, and that's probably been one of the biggest strategies to make sure the attestations are done. So we've asked our families to have attestations done as early as possible in the morning. And so they get emailed really early. I think it's like 4:30 a.m. and they're able to complete the attestation. So our buildings start calling families that we haven't received the attestations back from, parents or guardians, and they're able then to fill that out. So we've had really good success. Some of our buildings, it's just a small handful that aren't done by the time the kids get to school. And so it's the checking of the student name, either with a Chromebook, a phone, or a laptop, and pulling that up. We also are able to scan out of a Google Sheet some of the codes and see if the student's cleared. At the secondary level, something that I know that all of our secondary administrators and staff have been working on along with Greg is that our students are going to be able to get the attestations on their own phones if their parents give them permission to do so. So students will be able to complete that process on their own from 7th grade on, which will really expedite the process. And of course, kids can kind of do that independently. So, but if kids don't have it done by the time they get to school, that's where then we're contacting the family and doing a health screening or completing a paper attestation form as depending on. So a couple of ways to do it if we aren't able to have the electronic form done prior to.
I was really just curious how you know when you have 40 kids walking through the door. How do you know all 40 of them have actually done it? Or how do you find, you know that so-and-so hasn't done it? How do you find that kid before they walk in the door?
Our buildings know our kids. And so like I was thinking of Sherwood with 6 lines and, by names and so, or by grades. So kids are already going into like just K1, 2, however they split up the grades. And then they know which students that they're on the lookout for. So they call out or access those kiddos and then move forward. It's been really interesting. We learn every day, right? And then this Monday it was 3 through 6 back. So there's a lot more students back and it was a real test. And I know that secondary is kind of watching and learning what they're going to do as a result of it. And what we've realized is the more attestation lines, the better. More access to technology, the better, so we can move kids through quickly if we need to. Some families, we're there with kiddos with papers in hand and those kind of things. So we'll continue to do those things. The timing has been, we've been keeping an eye on that this week, and the timing has been really good. I heard from one building today that they were all in within like a minute of the start time. So they were proud because yesterday it was a couple 5 to 10 minutes after the start time, and then today they'd gotten it down to 9:51, and then their goal is to even be lesser time tomorrow. So I think as we get quicker and quicker at this, and as families learn the system, the other thing we have is the QR or the cards that have the kids is the QR code on them, and so we got those to all of our families at the K2 already had them, but our 3-6 kiddos too. So some are going on backpacks, some are going on lanyards and things. And they're able to scan those at the door too. So the first 2 days were probably the most cumbersome of all the days. And that would be the same at the secondary level.
A couple of things, Director Noble, that I observed yesterday watching 3-6 for the first time. Just a handful of students, surprisingly, had forgotten to do their attestations, and those students were kind of were sat down on a bench, and then an office manager came out and took their names and made phone calls, and we got those kids in as quickly as we could. But there's also, they also download lists out of Qualtrics to be able to have a clipboard, and as students are getting off the buses, they're checking their names, and then they're handing a student a little green card, and it's like a fast pass at Disneyland kind of a line where you get to walk right in. At secondary, with the ability to have secondary students have their attestations on their cell phones, once you complete the attestation, it brings up a green check mark on your phone. And you can just use that again, and using that same kind of a fast pass model that the student just shows the phone, and you check the date and time stamp on the screen, and the student's in. So I think secondary is having the benefit of being able to learn a lot from elementary and watching how they've worked out all the bugs. So I think we've got some pretty good tips, I think, to help us speed up the attestation process, and also just making sure that we have multiple lines. We know at secondary, trying to get 500 or 600 kids into a building is not going to be a small feat, when we need to check and make sure that every single one of them has done their attestation. So we'll have multiple lines running. And again, everybody will be equipped with the technology to make sure that they're able to check that those students have completed their attestations.
Thanks a lot for that explanation. I appreciate it.
So I have a couple of questions about the mental health supports. For the secondary kids, are these social emotional learning, are the lessons also for the kids who are remaining remote? Or are these for the kids, it sounds like it's helping them, re-engage in the building learning environment?
Well, it's a little bit of both, Director Kadams. It's intended for the students that are in person, but also the students that are remote. Because again, we're continuing to use that concurrent model, and so the students that are part of the advisory will be there as well, or part of the remote learning will be there for the advisory period as well. So they'll have an opportunity to participate in those activities as well.
Okay, and they're expected to be an advisory, is that right?
Yeah, because advisory is attached to one of the periods. It's not a standalone
Okay.
period. So it's part of their third period class or fourth period class, for example. And so they will be there already.
Okay, and I'm wondering, in terms of elementary, what is being done for the social emotional learning piece?
Well, I think that our adherence to our second step curriculum and the continued work that our school psychologists are doing with our teachers. And I think those are the pieces, the SEL pieces, that both for the remote and for the in-person, those lessons continue on just like we were when we were prior to COVID, which seems like a million years ago. But I think those are the commitments are still the same to do the lessons as we have adopted.
Are there any that are like specific for the, coming back in person and the in classroom learning environment sort of thing, or it's just more general than that?
Well, I think each teacher is working towards that some too, right? And then that re-engagement and being in person and kind of some of the things that you do when you're kind of first starting again with kids. And I know we had some shifting of classes and building community. So each teachers and buildings are doing that. Building principals have done some of that work too, and then leading that work. But commitment to that second step curriculum and being present, through the remote. They've been doing it kind of all year, but yes, I think it has, to your point, Director Kadams, I think it has evolved a little bit because it's a little different and unique, the needs of the kids.
Okay. And I'm wondering, so we did have a public comment on something that I wanted to follow up on. I know there was a lot of work when we thought we were doing hubs for the 3 through 12, grades 3 through 12, identifying the kids who were particularly needy and to follow up with them. So I'm wondering what's being done with those kids that have been identified, whether or not they're in person or remote, who were identified as having real needs that needed to be addressed on an individual basis.
I think that's a great question, Director Kadams, and I appreciate the comment from the community. That's a building by building. Also, just try to provide supports, but as a district, I think we do need to break down all the demographics and making sure that we're meeting the needs of kids, both that are in person and still fully remote. The kids that aren't able to come in for whatever reason to our brick and mortars. I think right now our biggest lift is just getting kids onto campus this week and next week, and but still continue to look at how else can we support all the kiddos that we know need additional just additional supports from the district. So that's something that I'd like to report back to the board in terms of what kids and how we're doing it. I know we still have our McKinney, our hub for our kids that are unhoused that are supporting some of our students, and I'd like to maybe consider some other options for us to, as we not only continue through the spring, but also into summer and into fall, because I think that's something that we're going to need to really focus on is this learning recovery that and learning acceleration that we'll need to have for the next few months for some of our students. So I'd like to maybe circle back with the board in terms of what that could look like. But right now, really our focus right now is on this week, bringing the kids back to our campuses, and next week our secondary. And I think that's going to be the primary focus. But as after that, I think we need to continue to focus on, again, which kids, and I'm sure every school knows and every classroom knows which kids need additional support, and we'll work with our principals to ensure that they're able to provide what they can provide, and we can augment as a district as well.
Thank you.
May I just ask quickly what Care Solace is?
It's a support that is like a concierge of services. So when families, so we've worked with our counselors and our school psychologists and our administrators and teachers to get out the information about contacting Care Solace, and they then connect families with mental health resources, a variety of mental health resources, either regionally or virtually. And so we've had 205 referrals to Care Solace, who then follow up within 24 hours to see if you've made the connection. So if I contact them, I'm concerned, I contact them within 24 hours. They've gotten back to me and then follow up with me too, to ensure that I was able to get the resources I needed.
Thank you.
Sure. Next slide. Just a quick vaccine update. The COVID-19 numbers are increasing in Snohomish County. As of Monday, we were at 152 per 100,000. We do think that that's due to the variant that's more contagious out of the UK. The biggest numbers are in those younger ages, and our nurse supervisor, Marana Bianco, was on a call, I think the same call that Dr. Balderas was on with DOH today, and really think that those high numbers in the youth are due to lack of the vaccine option. A third of Snohomish County residents have had at least their first dose, and 1/5 are completely vaccinated, which is really exciting. The vaccine eligibility is there. We're at about 60,000 vaccines a day across the state of Washington. As of April 15th, 16-year-olds plus are eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. And then, and of course, it's with parent or guardian permission. And then, as Dr. Balderas referred to, that could be down to 12-year-olds as soon as June, the beginning or maybe the middle of June is the last we're hearing. So hopefully that will go through soon so we can have access there. And then another thing that's been kind of exciting in the last few weeks, we've had lots of families reaching out to our student health department asking about vaccines and access and those kind of things. So we'll continue to put that information out as we get more vaccines. We didn't hear in the last couple of weeks of any mass distributions or, gosh, there's 5,000 vaccines at this spot. But when we do hear those, we will absolutely get those out to our staff and families as that information becomes available. And next slide. Just a quick wrap around on the on-site testing. We talked about this at the last board meeting also. Of course, the mitigating strategies, it's not just masks, but that physical distancing and washing your hands. But then another huge mitigating strategy is people who are having symptoms getting tested and not having to go somewhere else to get those tests. So the federal government, along partnering with the state, has this pilot project, and we are taking part in it. Several districts across the state are taking part. We're starting this at 3 schools, and then we will ramp it up to all of our buildings. We will start at 3 sites on April 26th. It is a partnership with Washington DOH. And what it offers us is an opportunity to have on-site testing, a self-administered test for anyone who's 4 years old or up. And so if I'm feeling COVID symptoms and I'm in a building, I could then go to the containment room, self-test, go home, and I'll have my test results within 48 hours. We'll run that as a district. We'll do the pickups and send those into the company. We're starting at Meadowdale High School, Meadowdale Middle School, and Spruce Elementary. And then we will ramp that up, hopefully by May 10th, to all of our school buildings. It'll be for staff and for students. We chose the curative model because of the ease of the self-administration and down to 4 years old, and then getting the results back within 48 hours. And the containment room will be, each of our school buildings has a containment room if somebody is feeling symptoms of COVID, and we'll use that as our flow through for this. So the tests will be there. And so if somebody enters the containment room, they'll have the option. And of course, students will always have to have a parent or guardian permission to be tested before they go. But it stops that leaving this space where you've started to have symptoms and having to go to a clinic or someone somewhere else with COVID symptoms, and is helpful because then we get the test results back to that person. And next slide. I'll turn it over to Rob.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to take a little bit of time to update the board and those on the call about our planning for summer learning opportunities. First, I'll talk about our elementary and middle school programming planning that we've done. And our intent for the summer is to offer a summer program that focuses on ELA, English Language Arts, math, social emotional learning, and physical activity. We're working on an identification process that uses existing data, but also partnering really closely with schools and of course teachers to identify those students that we believe would most benefit from summer learning programming. Our current intent is that we would offer an in-person model, but also like we did last summer, offer a fully remote option for families that may work better. And mostly, and we haven't done any polling on this yet, but the questions that have come in so far about summer learning, parents are really looking for those flexible options. So while an in-person isn't necessarily going to work with their summer schedule, remote option may work well. And when I say remote option, it would be similar to what we offered last year, where we partnered with a vendor. In last year's case, it was Edgenuity, which we're familiar with because they run they're the platform that eLearning uses for their curriculum. But last year we had a program that many families took advantage of. And so we'd like to provide that option as well. For our in-person option, we're planning on including transportation as well as breakfast and lunch. Lots more details still need to be worked out in terms of finalizing the curriculum, what assessment, what training for staff, those pieces are still under development. But at a high level, this is the outline of the plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. For our elementary middle school program, we're looking at a AM program and included dates on here for staff orientation and training as well, because we know we have some staff that are on the call and may be interested in knowing these dates. But our student program would begin after the 4th of July holiday. So the 6th is actually a Tuesday, and we'd run it until Thursday of the week of August 5th there. It'd be a Monday, Thursday program, and the in-person would be about 3 hours and 45 minutes is what we're targeting for that. We don't have a ton of muscle memory as a district for an in-person elementary and middle school summer learning program in the ways that we used to. So those that have been with the district for a long time know that probably up until 2005, 2006, there was some level of programming that was centrally coordinated and run. But due to budget cuts later in that decade, that program went away. So we're ramping this up and really looking forward to this option for our students and families. Next slide, please. We're also going to have a high school program, and the main focus of our high school program will be credit recovery. As we know, we have many students that, because of circumstances, have an incomplete that they're carrying from perhaps as far back as last school year, and also the no credit designation for this year. And so while many things are already underway to help students recover that credit, we want to make sure that we have a robust summer program for them as well. This one, we actually do have a fair amount of muscle memory for. And Greg and his team has led a summer learning program that has fit this model and will be replicated, but at a bigger scale for the coming summer. The program is mostly delivered online. In the past, it's been through Edgenuity. We're looking at Edgenuity, but also possibly other options. In addition to credit recovery, we know that some students like to take advantage of this opportunity for some acceleration. So maybe to pick up a credit for an additional course. And we want to the degree we're able to accommodate it, we want to make those offerings as well. And our hope is to provide transportation and breakfast and lunch as well. Next slide. The schedule is very similar, except you'll see that it extends by 1 week. While the K-8 program would finish on the 5th, our belief is that we need a little bit longer to give students the time that they need to get that credit. So while the K-8 program will be 5 weeks, our intent for the high school program is that it will be 6 weeks. We're also looking at running an AM and a PM session. And that's important for, in particular, for the in-person lab pieces. While most of it is online, there is some expectation for on-site lab time. And we'll be finalizing what those expectations will be for students. Lots of work ahead. We'll be working with our EEA partners to discuss a few issues related to compensation and some other working condition related items for our summer school. And then we will get those jobs posted, and we'll begin our recruitment and hiring process for that. We're also in the process of hiring administrators for that program, as well as health services staff, and then quite a few classified staff, paraeducators, office support, food service, a whole big operation to support this effort. I anticipate that one of your questions will be about what do we anticipate will be the scope of the program, and that is really the big question. We can make some estimates based on data you've reviewed in the past about credit recovery option, needs based on when we've shared the number of students that are carrying an incomplete and those kinds of things. So based on those, that there are lots of students that we hope will access and benefit from the high school program. At the elementary program, it's really determining both what we can manage and what the need is. And I started with what we can manage because for an in-person program, we need to have ample staff so that we can serve the students in the instructional program, but also meet all of the other requirements associated with health and safety. And so there are definitely some things that we want to manage, but our goal is to invite as many students as we can possibly serve in those programs this summer. I think that's it for me, unless there are questions specific to summer programming.
Just a reminder to the board. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ann, please.
Yeah, this is Ann. I had a question. So if we have more demand than we have availability, how will slots be determined?
Well, it's really a couple of pieces. One is we'll work with our assessment team to develop a prioritization list for each school that's by class and by grade level. And then we want to partner with teachers to sort of review that prioritization list. And, we also want to, we know that if let's say that we believe that 25% of current K-8 students would benefit from in-person learning, we know that not all 25% are going to take advantage. And so that's it's the calculation we have to kind of do. But if there is more demand, it really comes down to our ability to recruit staff to serve. And so if it looks like we'll recruit right up until the day the program starts or thereafter. So our goal is to serve as many students as we can. But we also want to be attentive to, we don't want something to be a disaster. For example, we wouldn't want to commit to having a program at every elementary school if we're unable to serve all of the health needs, right? We're still going to have to do an attestation process. We're still going to need to have a containment room. We're still going to need to have a health para on site for all of those. And so some considerable staffing implications. And the reason I'm leading with staffing is, kind of, I don't want it to be a limiting factor, but it's just being realistic is, we read something, this will come no surprise to you. It was shared with our, with Ed Northwest, which is a partnership we have through the Gates Foundation grant. And the statistic they shared with us was that nationally, it looked like about 11% of certificated teachers were interested in summer work. No surprise at all, right? And so if that's the case here, we know that we need to branch out. Debbie Carter and the Human Resources team has already surveyed our certificated substitutes, and we have quite a list of those staff that are willing and interested. And we also know that we have several student teachers, interns that are finishing up their pre-service work and would be available. And even last year at the small scale that we had teachers that were from other districts that jumped in kind of last minute. And so we will recruit far and wide to meet as much of the interest as we can. But I think the other side of that answer is also, we don't want to think about this as just limited to summer. The comment that Dr. Baldera spoke to is what we're doing now. There's the summer learning, and then there's also what are we going to do next year and ongoing to continue to support those students. So we're not going to get everyone in the summer learning program. So how do we make sure that we're continuing to track who those students are and how we can support them beyond just the summer?
I have a quick question. Is there any cost to students at any of the grade levels for doing any of the summer opportunities?
That's not our plan at this time. I can be corrected by a colleague, but because we're able to access the ESSER dollars for this specific purpose, that allows it. And then in the past, some of the credit recovery acceleration pieces with our high school program, you might recall that there used to be a cost to some of our students, and Greg has really worked to get a goal so that comes at no cost to students. So our plan for this summer is that it will be at no cost to any of our students.
So Director Kadams, the goal would be it be no cost this summer, and we're also allocating some ESSER dollars for next summer as well. So the goal is this is a multi-month, several month recovery just effort to just support our kiddos. So that's the goal. And again, to remind the board also that 20% of ESSER 3 dollars has to be set aside for extended learning. So this is this is where we're going to be attaching these dollars to. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Next slide.
So what we know right now for planning for next year is we're going to continue to follow the Department of Health guidelines, and as will be a requirement over the summer and for next year, the 3-foot rule for students in school. But right now, again, the 6-foot rule is still in effect for this spring. I know that the information keeps shifting, but when kids are eating and also in passing, during passing times, or when kids are congregated. And also, vaccines, as noted earlier in the PowerPoint, are expected to be released here for secondary kids. And again, that's still, I'm sure positive that there will be some level of safety, for example, mask wearing and so forth, and the cleaning that we're doing right now, and attestations, I'm assuming. And again, we will continue to adapt and be nimble as the information keeps shifting, as staff have been doing all year. So again, but we do need to start planning for next year. And I know that's a conversation we're going to be having with our associations in terms of what next year looks like in schools and off the 3 feet. And again, right now we're still under the 6 foot rule for this spring, and don't know, again, I don't know if that's going to change or not later on, but we're fully assuming that we're going to be under these guidelines. So we're going to be making plans for that in terms of how many kiddos can we fit in a classroom that's safe for everybody in the room, to make sure that, again, we're providing the best service and the best opportunity for kids to learn and teachers to teach. Next slide.
But to be clear, we could actually be hybrid next fall.
We definitely could. And again, as Dana stated, we're 152 per 100,000 right now. Right. Again, we could very much be very much hybrid in the fall. And again, the shots in arms and getting kids to be vaccinated, I think that's something that we're very, very hopeful for. But absolutely, I foresee us not being in a regular setting for a few more months. So just because of the fact that we do have, again, kids that will be wanting to stay fully remote for a while, and also, just the way the vaccines have been of late, just it's been very difficult, as some of the adults have had difficulty finding vaccines right now. So, and don't see that changing, especially with the Johnson & Johnson being pulled off the shelf here for some time. I don't know how long that's going to be, but it's a pause. So I think with any pause, it causes a block in vaccine distribution. So, but again, it was very hopeful today by Dr. Spitters and the Snohomish County Health Department when they did state that he felt that the Pfizer vaccine, could be out very soon for our kiddos, sometime this spring or early summer, which was very hopeful, very hopeful. Next slide, please. If that's it.
Yes, Dr. Balderas.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Thank you again. Are there any other questions from the board that we can answer or entertain? Again, I do want to really just thank all the folks that did this heavy lift, and I do want to turn it over to students. I know we have students on the call today, and they're high school students, so just want to maybe have them give an opportunity in terms of what their thoughts are right now as they're preparing to either stay fully remote or come onto campuses. Maybe just open it up to our kids, if I could, President Kilgore and board.
Sure. So first of all, a thing that popped into my head while this summer school presentation was going was the idea of like utilizing I know like high school honor society and stuff like that has been put on hold kind of this year because we have really struggled to find a way to be able to do what we usually do in-person school with honor society this year. But I feel like the credit recovery concept kind of warrants an opportunity for those honor society students and things like that for to provide a little bit of extra support over the summer when needed. And then in terms of returning to hybrid and staying remote, I have people that I keep in contact with that are planning on going back, and then a few of us are definitely staying remote. And I think for the people going in person, there's a lot of excitement for this kind of sense of normalcy. Anything at this point, like we've been in this model for so long, that change, while being kind of scary, is also kind of welcome as well. A lot of nerves, obviously. And I had to go in this week for a couple things for school. The attestation form process was really smooth, although to be fair, I was one of the only people there, so that's probably why as well. But yeah, there's quite a bit of nervousness. Like obviously nobody's done this before, so staff are nervous, we're nervous. We'll see how this goes, but is change and hopefully a return to a little bit more of what we call normal in the good way.
Thank you, Ritika.
I agree with what Ritika said. I'm going back to hybrid as a senior, and it all feels kind of surreal because I just picked up my cap and gown today too. So this whole year has been such a roller coaster, and I'm glad that there's somewhat of a like she said, normalcy, like that's coming back, and I can kind of relive like my senior year once and for all. But I'm really excited to go back in person to see my friends and actually meet my teachers in person. But also, like, I think I would benefit more academically because I'm a visual learner as well. So I think my skills and what I learned from the class will improve too. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I agree again with both Cerelia and Ritika, and I'm so happy that the credit recovery is an option. And I know that like all high schoolers are going to really be happy about that also. And I'm going to go back in person too, and I'm a junior, so I'm very excited because especially for like science classes, even though we're not going to be able to do like the normal amount of labs that we would be doing, it's still exciting knowing that we can do something. And I also have other friends in high schools and other districts who have already gone back, and they've only said positive things about it, and they're just really happy to be back. So I'm excited too.
I'm staying online, but I'm excited for my fellow students to be getting the chance to go back in person. And I also agree, I like the push for credit recovery because when I took a credit recovery class over the summer a while back, and back then there wasn't a ton of clear information on it, but I think with this push, it's going to be a lot more accessible to a lot of students. My only concern with the attestation forms would be the efficiency, just because there are so many students, but I'm sure everything will get worked out within a short period of time. So thank you.
Vanya?
Thank you, Stu. Adna?
Yeah, just to reiterate what my other fellow student advisor said, I think the credit recovery system will really be beneficial to students, and I'm excited to see now that like the vaccinations are open, I'm excited to see what that will hold for the future. Maybe not for this school year, but hopefully for next school year to get to a sense of normalcy, and just seeing what like other students think about that.
Thank you, students. I had one little question. I don't know if we have an answer to this yet or not, but about what percent of 7th to 12th grade students are planning to come back in? Do we know that?
It's about 67%, Director Kilgore. And that number's changed a little bit. It's been up and down, but we think it's about 67%.
It's 66. If you're looking at numbers K-12, it averages out to about 66. Looked at those numbers this afternoon.
Right, I saw 65 for K through 6, and I was just curious how secondary compared. Okay, any other questions or comments, board? Okay, thank you. Next we have our business and finance report. Lydia.
Thank you. I'm Lydia Selly, Business and Finance, and we are talking about February. Keep in mind things are changing weekly, but this is the best snapshot and projections as of February 28th. So if we go to the first page. Thank you. Looking at the general fund, tracking this very closely, you can see that a year ago, we were about $1 million increase to fund balance at this point in time. We're down about 3.9 million, but don't worry, it's been consistent and expected with some of our lost enrollment. and it still meets the graph that we'll see later in the presentation. The Associated Student Body Fund is down about 200,000, but they have had a healthy reserve among all the schools, so they're still in good shape. And then transportation, just to point out, so last year we did have probably 9 more buses than we had drivers. We certainly have more buses than drivers, have increased as we're getting our drivers back. So our push right now is to get our drivers back in place and then start, recruiting early summer to stabilize our staff going into next fall. Also, a little pause on purchasing buses because remember that Sound Transit is still there constructing light rail, and it's been going very well, but we do have all our buses parked in front of the campus instead of back. And part of the project through Sound Transit will be when they have completed, they will restripe and rebuild our parking lot back there. Next slide. Okay, and sorry, I have allergy voice or something tonight. So I looked at last year, and last year was pretty much the last month that it was pre-COVID, and so things were very normal for February of 2020. If I look at February of 2021, know that in local support non-tax, again, as I've mentioned, that we don't have very many rentals, and we don't have local meal sales. And so those are the largest contributors to local support non-tax. Our state general purpose apportionment is lagging to the budget as expected because of being under enrolled. And then state special purpose is, you can see it's considerably down from last year, and most of that is in transportation. So as you recall from the last meeting, they have reduced transportation significantly this year. And we are planning on using available ESSER funds to backfill any shortfall at the end of the year. Okay, next slide. One of the things I don't usually point out is on the left side of your screen, it does talk about the 10 top sources of revenue year to date. That's a useful tool for our community to kind of assess how a school district is funded. And again, that does reflect the earlier screen where you can see some of the variations in revenues this year compared to last year. But again, that's a nice snapshot for people to see that the majority of our funding comes from the state, followed by local property taxes. And next slide. Also on this top 10 expenditures, I was looking for transportation because it was much higher on the list last year. It has fallen to 1.7 million through this point in the school year, and last year it was 7.1. So we obviously significantly reduced our pupil transportation expenditures as we were not transporting very many schools. That will start picking up a little bit, but still, again, watching the expenditures compared to the reduction in state revenues. Okay, and then on to the next slide. So right now, the blue line is at 23.7 million projected to end the school year. That's been consistent with previous months. And again, we're still keeping an eye. We do know that there'll be an increase in expenditures as we get our kids into hybrid learning, which we will, examine ESSER funds for possibilities on financing some of those new costs that are involved with remote learning and hybrid learning. So holding steady to earlier projections. And then the final chart. Oh, no, I'm missing enrollment. I'm so sorry. So from January to February, we dropped about 27 full-time equivalent students. I looked at 18-19, which was our last quote unquote normal school year. And in that month span, we actually dropped 65 students. So a drop from January to February is typical, and it seems like our decrease was definitely less than 2 years prior. So that's good news. And hopefully kids will get excited as we're ramping up our opportunities for students. And now finally, the last 5 slides are the required budget status reports for your review at any time. And are there any questions for this month? Director McMurray.
I'm wondering, with students going back into the classroom end of March, April, are we anticipating a continued drop in enrollment? Or because kids are going back into the classroom, are we recapturing some of our kids? And does it appear as if our enrollment might actually tick up a little bit for April?
And that is what we're going to be paying close attention to. So I don't have any good anecdotal data, and I'll be watching that data closely and remain optimistic that some students who maybe didn't do as well in remote maybe want to return with an in-person opportunity. Director Noble.
Yeah, I was curious about how you're doing with next year's budget and how you can even do it, considering this you don't have any baseline to work with anymore because we've gotten so much ESSER funds. So with no baseline to work with, how are you completing or attempting to complete a budget for next year?
So one of the things that Dr. Balderas and I have discussed is trying to split ESSER between those 1 or 2 time costs, or costs that maybe continue in 21-22, but we won't need in 22-23, for instance. So making sure that we remain with our staffing models, enhance those staffing with, those kind of, I don't want to say just summer school, but any sorts of programs in the fall that are kind of supplemental to your program of basic education for learning opportunities. Those we could use ESSER funds for, so that we don't, in year 3, all of a sudden have no ESSER funds and have this program. So we're sticking with staffing standards that we've used in the past, projecting enrollment by school and by grade, staffing those accordingly, examining our revenue sources, excuse me, and waiting for the legislature to finish also.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Lydia. Next, we have a report on secondary interventions and supports. Dr. Vergara.
Thank you. Good evening, President Kilgore, board members, Superintendent Balderas, student, staff, and community. And actually, I have with me Mr. Schwab. Both of us are going to team up with this presentation. Mr. Schwab, would you like to start, please?
Yes. Good evening again, everybody. And so we want to start with, let me quickly review the agenda. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk with you tonight about some of our student data that we are looking at when we talk about interventions and supports that we've designed at the middle school and high school. We think it's really important that we paint the picture why. Why do we need interventions and supports at the middle school and high school? Then we're going to talk specifically about some of the courses and interventions that we have at both the middle school and high school. What are some of the ways that we support students? And then we want to move into a discussion about AVID, which is a new intervention that we are proposing to bring to the district. And then we want to talk a little bit about the implementation of AVID for the next school year. So let's start with a little bit of the why. Why talk about interventions at the secondary level? And so if we could go to the next slide, please. So we've talked about this before, and we did a report on our graduation rate data a couple of board meetings ago. But what we know is that our on-time graduation rate for the Edmond School District for all of our high school programs has remained relatively unchanged for the last 7 years. It's currently at about approximately 84%. We also know that we have a couple of high schools that have graduation rates that we need to see addressed. And we also know that we have a pretty significant underrepresentation of students of color in our advanced classes at the secondary level. So these are just some of the reasons why we talk about the importance of interventions at the secondary level. And so I think now Dr. Vergara is going to walk us through a little bit of data. And this is just one slice of data that among the multiple data sets that we take a look at when we think about interventions and supports.
Yes, next slide, please. Thank you, Greg. And we decided to concentrate in mathematics to show you a little bit of math data to really build a case on why it's important not only to look at interventions for students at risk, but also for all of our students, right? Some people may not call them interventions, but so AVID could be could be one of the systems that we are wanting to implement here in Edmonds. So looking at this data, I want to start with 7th grade pre-algebra. So we have 1,731 7th grade students this year. 428 of them, or 25% of them, are taking pre-algebra, again at grade 7. And if you look on the right, in red, you can see some arrows. We're identifying specific groups and within our student population. And I want you to, I'm gonna point out a couple of them. Black African-American students. Out of the 1,731 students, 8.3% are Black African-American, and only 8.64% of that group is taking pre-algebra at the 7th grade level. Okay, so this is how you read the numbers. In terms of Hispanic Latino population, another 22% of the 1,700 are Hispanic, identified as Hispanic, Latino, Latina students, and 11% of that 22 are taking pre-algebra at the 7th grade level. So then we go to the next slide, please. Then a 7th grade level.
Dr. Vergara?
Yes.
I may not be understanding this. Is it 8.6, for instance, for our African-American students? Is this representing a disproportionality, or is,
yes,
I don't understand it.
Yeah, so let me put it in numbers. So for example, for the Black African-American students, so 8.31% of the 1,730 students, 31 students is about 138. So 138 Black African-American, and out of the 138, only 8% are taking pre-algebra at the 7th grade, which is equivalent to 11 African-American students. Okay, so on the left side, you see the percentage of the 1,731 students, and on the right numbers are the percentage of that or the main percentage of students taking that class. And I can give you another example. Latina students, we have a total of 380 students at the 7th grade level, and 11%, which is 41 students, are taking pre-algebra at 7th grade.
Okay, I'm with Deborah. I am not understanding this. So we're talking about 7th grade kids, that there are 1,731 7th grade kids who are taking pre-algebra this year. Is that correct? No.
No, it's no, the total.
What are the 1,731 kids?
That is the
That's
total.
the total number of seventh graders that
That's
we
correct.
have in the district.
That's correct. Yes. And
So
only
25% of them are taking pre-algebra.
correct. That's correct.
How-
At seventh grade
So
level.
we're not looking at how many are taking algebra here.
It is
Well,
coming. It's coming in the next slide.
Okay, so for
Yes.
those, so are we thinking of pre-algebra as an advanced course for seventh graders?
Correct. So I'm trying, yes. So we're
okay.
trying, yes, we're trying to show, starting in seventh grade is when the kids have access to pre-algebra and algebra classes, which are considered advanced math classes at that level. So we're
Okay.
wanting to show you the numbers, the number of students taking those classes.
So when we're looking at, for the Black African-American students, on the left, the 8.3% is what? Is that the percent of Black students out of the seventh grade class?
Correct. Out of the 1,731 students.
So that's not a disproportionality. To have 8.6% taking it seems about right.
But
Is that
the
correct?
So the disproportionality, if you look at Latinos, we're roughly 23%, 22.76%.
Right. So that's where I was going. So I'm just trying to understand it. So our Black kids are actually represented proportionately to their percentage in the population in terms of pre-algebra, but our Hispanic students are not.
Correct.
Am I getting that correct?
Yes. So.
And our
yes,
white
I
students are overrepresented somewhat. Okay,
correct.
thank
And
you.
I get, yeah, and the case that I was wanting to point out is that 8% of that 8% of Black African-American students are taking pre-algebra seventh grade, right? So when we go to the numbers again, it's about 11 students, 11 African-American students out of the 138.
So that's different because Nancy, I think the way you and I were reading this is that it was 8.64% of the students taking pre-algebra are Black African-American, but that's not what this number is. This number 8.64 is the percentage of African-American students who are taking this.
So like if you look at the American Indian, Native Alaskan, we have identified 0.51% of students, right, for the student population, seventh grade student population. None of them are taking pre-algebra at the seventh grade level.
No, I understand that. It's just normally when I see numbers like this, I see 8% of the students are African-American. And then if we see 8% of the students taking the class are African-American, we would say that's proportionate.
Correct.
So
that's not what you were saying. There's two different ways to interpret these numbers. The way that Deborah just said is the conventional way, and I'll go with the female. That's a big number. That's you're saying it. 46% of the population of that school is female, and 51% of the population that is taking algebra is female, which means females are overrepresented in taking the course. That would be how I would interpret this chart is supposed to say. But what you are telling us is that 46% of the population is female, and of that 46%, only half of them, 51%, actually took algebra, which would mean essentially 25% of the girls took algebra.
Correct.
Or 25% of the people taking algebra are girls, whereas 46% of the population actually is girls.
Correct.
But you said it two different ways, and I believe the
So,
first
yeah,
way we're
which is
saying
it?
it is correct.
And I have one slide at the end of the data slide that is going to show the progression in terms of the subgroups. If may, are we okay going and moving to the next slide? And Greg, I don't know if it's anything else that you want to add
Not
to this?
really. I really would like clarification. Gary, you did a good job of pointing out the two different explanations of the data, but it's very different what we're talking about. Are if
So
we're
again,
saying,
go ahead.
so you're saying, yeah, Victor, I believe what you're saying is, so 46% of all our 7th graders are girls.
Yes.
And 51% of all the kids taking pre-algebra are girls.
46% of all the students are girls, and
Mhm.
51% of that 46% are taking pre-algebra.
That, I don't find that useful.
So the
I
only
find-
useful thing with that kind of number is it doesn't really care about the proportion of males or females or Asians or African Americans in the population. All you care about is percentage of the percentage of the available females, 51% are taking pre-algebra, but the percentage of available African Americans, only 8% are. So it's really the magnitude of that column is the only thing that matters.
So we're
So-
saying 8 for the Black African American kids. Are we saying 8.64% of 8.31%? It's a very
Yes.
confusing way to show this. A percentage
Yes.
of a percentage.
Yes.
I'm sorry. So but you said you have numbers. So maybe we
Yes.
should just go.
And I do have one more
I
slide.
can't
and
make sense
apolo-
out of this.
And I apologize. The goal of showing you the left numbers was just to show you the whole population and the percentages that are connected to the total number of students, which in this case is 1,731. But if you may move forward, we have one more slide that is going to show the progression in terms of the classes. This is algebra, so it shows the same number of the students, 1,731, and 243 of them, or 14%, are taking algebra at the seventh grade level. And again, you have the numbers, the percentages on the right. We have, again, Black African American, 3.2%, 3.29, and Hispanic Latino, 7.81. And then in the bottom, you have by program, bilingual education or English learners, free and reduced lunch, homeless, and special education. A percentage of students taking algebra at that level. May I go to the next slide, please?
Wait.
Yes.
What you just said was that the number in blue is the percentage of kids in that demographic who are taking algebra.
At the
Not
seventh
that
grade
that's
level.
not that that's the percent of the kids in
So for the bilingual education, we had at the seventh grade level, we had 12.18 percentage of students identified. None of them are taking algebra class at the seventh grade level.
Okay, well, that's clear. 0 is 0 no matter what so there are no kids who are called who are specifically enrolled in bilingual education at the moment who are taking algebra.
Exactly right. Same with homeless population.
But so let's go up to something that we can understand that has numbers attached. So female, again, half our kids, 48% of our 7th graders are female. So the percentages here would say 37% of the kids taking algebra are girls and 62% of them are boys.
Correct.
So it's the percent out of the kids taking algebra. It's not the percent out of the number of kids, out of the number of females.
The percentage of kids taking algebra, yes.
Right.
So
So that was
62% male and 37 female.
Okay, so this does get at disproportionality, and I'm assuming that the slide before was also doing the same thing.
Correct. May I go to the previous slide, please?
But so given that definition, then it's not disproportional for pre-algebra for Black African American students, but it is for Hispanic Latino.
That's
that,
right.
is that right?
Yep.
Well,
And Asian students are a bit overrepresented and white students are overrepresented.
could I just, maybe, I'm trying to get away from the percentages and just go with strict numbers. So is this how I'm understanding it? On the slide that says for grade 7 algebra proportionality, for 2 or more races, the percentage in the district is 10.51% of our students are 2 or more races. So if I take 1,731 students times 10.51%, that gives me about 182 students within that 7th grade cohort. And you're saying that of that 182 students that are 2 or more races, only 10.69% are actually taking algebra, which is about 20 students.
Correct.
So out of 182 students that could potentially be taking it, only 20 are. I'm trying to get rid of the percentages. Is that how I'm supposed to read this?
That is how I was reading this also. And Greg, are you?
Yes.
I really think that is wrong because the numbers add up to 100%. So the male female thing, you have 46% male and 53% 53% male and 46% female. It adds up to 100%. And then on the percent taking pre-algebra, 51% female take it and 48% of male take it, which and again adds up to 100%. So I believe that it is the way I originally said it, that 46% of the girls, 46% of the population is is female, but 51% of the people taking pre-algebra are female, because each of these segments add up to 100% on both columns. So I think the way that I'm saying it, the other way would not make sense. They would not add up to 100%.
So Director Noble, that you are adding 100% will be the student, the ethnicity, race, and the sex, female and male, but not the program, is what you're saying, correct?
That's right. That when you get down to the kids in the program, what Gary is saying doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But I agree with Gary, and for the same reason. And that's when you're looking at it, you can see, you expect girls and boys that to be 100% and the races to be 100% when you add them up. And
Correct. Go ahead. Go ahead, Nancy, I'm sorry.
well, I'm thinking that when we talk about it in terms of numbers, the way Anne was going at it, it may be in fact this thing. So that 10% of 428 is 42 kids. Anne was with, if 10%, whoops, I think my internet went out. If we're saying 10% of the kids who are 2 or more races, actually, I have to question whether or not 10.51 and 10.51, that's an unusual thing for those two numbers to be exactly the same for 2 or more races on pre-algebra. And if that's a typo, I don't know. But 10.51, no, it wouldn't be the same thing. You're either taking 10.51% of 428, which would be like 42 kids, or you're taking 10.51% of the, what did you say, Anne, about 20 kids?
Yeah, if you take,
that's not the same.
Yeah, so because if you've got if you have 10.51% of 1,731 kids, it gets you about 182 kids. And if you take those 182 kids and then you multiply that by the figure in the blue figure, which is 10.69, that only gets you 20 kids. But if you take the 1,731 number and multiply it by the 10.69, instead of 182 kids, you're at about 185 kids. So it really does matter which way you read this. And my suggestion would be to maybe redo this with not percentages, but actual number of kids, because then we can kind of extrapolate from the raw numbers. It's hard for me to figure it out from the way this particular thing is put together.
Yeah, and
Actually,
go.
I'm sorry, but to see disproportionality, you need to see percentages. But what you need to see is percentage of kids in the population and then percentage of kids from that demographic in the program. And so I have no problem with looking at numbers, but I definitely want to, with numbers, it's very hard to tell if it's disproportionate or not. So what I would like is the column on the right to represent that percent of that demographic, Asian students, for example, who are in pre-algebra, compared to on the left, the percent of Asian kids in 7th grade. And that's what would tell me if it's disproportionate or not to the population. And that, you can show other statistics, but that's what would tell us the disproportionality.
I'm pretty convinced that's what this chart is actually showing.
Okay, and I apologize. So we will produce a more accurate report and send it to you, board members, as soon as possible with the percentages and also numbers. Okay. If may I go to next slide, please? And again, the idea was to show from pre-algebra to algebra, the 7th grade, and then going to 9th grade. If you can go to next slide, please. And the data that was we're wanting to show here was the algebra 9th grade level. Next page, next slide, please. Then intensify algebra is another opportunity for students at the 9th grade also. And you may go to next slide, please. And then the algebra 2, that is another option at the 9th grade level. If you can go to the next one then, please. So here, the idea, so here what we did is to talk, we grabbed the numbers from the right column, right, the percentages. And the idea was to talk about the number of white students that are taking more pre-algebra and algebra classes when you compare them with different subgroups. And then by the time that you get to, like, for example, in the gray line is the Latina students. So the Latina students, less students are studying with pre-algebra and algebra the 7th grade, but then they take algebra class at the 9th grade. And the white students, they more number of students are taking pre-algebra the 7th grade, algebra the 7th grade, and then the number goes down to 9th grade algebra because many of them already took that class. So then they go to a 9th grade intensify algebra and algebra 2, and that is the number of students also taking the white students. And the gray line is the Latina students, and then you see Black students, and in the bottom, American Indian, Native Alaska students, and Native Hawaiian students. But again, my commitment to all of you is that we will produce a more clear report in terms of the 7th grade and 9th grade and share with you as soon as possible.
This is Ann. So what I'm getting is, if we could get that slide back,
yeah, can we
that
go
last
back,
one, is that because of the trajectory that starts in 7th grade, what happens is the white students are getting farther along, more of them are getting farther along than the Black students or the Latina and Latino students, because of what happens in 7th grade sets up a pattern of how much math and how far they're able to get by the time they get into 9th grade and following. Is that a correct interpretation of this? Okay.
That's correct. Thank you, and yes. If we go to next slide, please. Also, I have a couple more slides of data. One is this one is about APIB. So we have a total of, and this includes 11 and 12 graders. We have 3,492 students, and 1,089 of them are taking at least one APOIB class in 11 and 12 grade. And again, the numbers are on the right in terms of ethnicity, race, and program numbers. But again, I will clarify this with the board as soon as possible. And we go to the next slide, please. The last one about this is the number of full IB students. So we have 176 full IB student candidates in our schools, which is equivalent to 5% of our student population, 11 and 12. And here on the right side, you have the percentages again.
I'll show you again on this data that what I was saying is actually the way it is. On this one, you can see 5% of students are full IB students. And so if you look at under ethnicity, white, 44% of the students are white, which would about half the students are white. So out of that 3,492 students, that means 1,700 are white. And then it says 47% of the white students took if you say 47% of the available white students, well, if you say white students are 44% of the population and 47% of that took the 47% of them took the class, then half the population is 1,700 students. And if half of those, if the number of white students is 1,700 and half of those white students took it, that is as 900 students. And there's only 176 actually took it. So what this is a real proportionality, like we talked about at the beginning. 44% of the students are white, but 47% of the students who take full IB are white. It's not a percentage of a percentage. It can't be. It comes out.
No, Gary, I completely agree. It's obvious. And the trend here is exactly what you'd expect the trend to be of the disproportionality based on the history in the district. So your doing that analysis was really great to be able to indicate it with the numbers, but the other doesn't make any sense in this. Absolutely. So this actually gives us what we want to see in terms of disproportionality for each of the demographic groups.
We go to next slide, please. Graduation 2020 and dropout by student demographics. On the left side, you see the graduating students by ethnicity again, white students, Black students, Latino, Latina, and Native Hawaiian students. And on the right side, you see the dropout numbers. Next slide, please. This is the post-high school college data class from 2005 to 2018. The top part is the question is what percentage of students enroll in the first year after graduation? So a 4-year, 37% of our student population, 2-year CTC programs, 32%, and non-enrolled, 31%. Then what percent of enrollees persist beyond the first year? 95% for 4-year and 67% for 2-year. And then what were the highest degrees attained within 8 years of graduation? We have 43% with a bachelor or higher, 13% with a associate certificate, and no degree, 44%. And then the last in the bottom is the median earning of graduates in the first 12 years after graduation. And again, this is for Edmond School District, class of 2005 to 2018. And then next slide, please. I want to show you the Washington State, the same data. So again, on the top, the percent of students enrolled in the first year after graduation, 4-year, 35%, 2-year, 25%, non-enrolled, 40%. Percent of enrollees persisted beyond the first year, 89%. 4-year students and 63% 2-year students. and then the highest degrees attained within 8 years, 33% with a bachelor and 13% associate, and no degree, 54%. And then the median earnings in the bottom. So again, this is for you to compare the state numbers with the Edmonds numbers.
Is there a way to, and would it be worthwhile to look at this analysis and sort of compare us to schools, districts in the Puget Sound region, because we're much more economically aligned with people east, west of the mountains, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We can get that data for you. So again, the idea, and we go to the next slide, and I know Mr. Schwab is going to take it from here. The idea to show you all this data was to really talk about our different subgroups and really to build a case for why it's important to have middle school and high school interventions, and not interventions only for at-risk students, but different type of interventions that fit the needs of all our students. And with that, I'm going to ask Greg to talk a little bit about middle school interventions.
But before we go on, I don't want to lose this thought. What I'm really interested in that I think could be very helpful for the district is to know what happens to the kids who are not graduating. What's happening, not the ones that are going on and getting degrees, but what's happening to the kids who are not graduating? Why are they not graduating? And if we can figure that out, then I think we should be tailoring interventions to try to address the reasons why those kids are dropping out or not finishing. And so I think doing some kind of follow-up on the kids who aren't getting a degree or a diploma of any sort would be a useful thing to do. I don't know if it's easy to do, but I think it would be a useful thing to do.
And Director Kadams, one of the things we know about the students who don't finish is they tend to fall in a couple of categories. One is they are persisters, so they come back and they do a 5th year and they finish up, or they ultimately drop out. And so of those students on that previous slide that, or a couple of slides earlier where we were looking at the students that were graduates and the students who were classified as dropouts, there's also a percentage of students in there as well that come back and do a 5th year. That's one of the reasons why the state now tracks graduation rate, not only for 4-year, but 5-year, 6-year, and 7-year graduation rates, because they recognize that some students' paths to graduation are a little more circuitous and take a little bit longer, but they do eventually get to graduation. But to your question about, the student that student that doesn't finish and ultimately drops out, that's a missing data point for sure, that to understand what happened to that student and what were the reasons why that student saw no other option but to not finish school. So that certainly is something that we need to follow up on.
I'd sure also love to know what makes a difference between a persister and a non-persister.
That's a great question, right?
What is there something we can look at in the data if we took the group of kids who are persisters and the group of kids who are not persister, who we don't see again? Are there some commonalities among the persisters that we could help create, in the non-persisters somehow? Anyway, I'd love to know what makes a persister a persister.
And I would, and this is my very unscientific analysis of that, but usually most of our persisters are students that they tend to stay with us even through their senior year. But a lot of our students who are dropouts, we lose them way earlier on in their high school career, and so we lose track of them for whatever reason. They either they tell us they're going to go to another program and they never enroll, and we lose track of them. I'm going to talk about Graduation Alliance in a little bit, which is one of the reasons why I think having Graduation Alliance has been a really positive thing for us, because of the number of those students we've been able to contact and recover. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the interventions that we have currently in place at middle school and high school. And so I wanted to just share a little bit with you about some of the work that our middle schools are doing first to identify students based on their need for more intensive instruction. So For example, at College Place Middle School, they offer 2 sections of math support. And again, students are selected based on their need for intensive instruction in mathematics based on their SBA and other data scores. Briar Terrace Middle School has literacy support, as well as 1 section of Math 7 and Math 8 support as well. And each of these courses take the place of an elective that students have to take again, because we think that providing these interventions for students are so important. And if we could go to the next slide, please. And at Alderwood Middle School, they offer 3 sections of literacy support, and students are identified as level 1. Students identified as level 1 on the SBA and or low iReady data receive differentiated support in reading comprehension strategies and vocabulary. And at Meadowdale Middle School, they offer a reading intervention as well as 2 sections of math intervention. And then if I could talk a little bit about the high school on the next slide. So at the high school, we have a fairly robust set of interventions, starting first with credit retrieval. We provide resources to our high schools to offer credit retrieval. Edmonds Woodway uses a different model of credit retrieval because they are right next to the e-learning campus. And so they have a graduation coordinator that works with those students, but they don't have graduation or credit retrieval courses offered at Edmonds Woodway High School because their students just access the credit retrieval courses through e-learning. We offer credit retrieval during the school day as well. We also offer it as a 7th period class. We also offer intensified algebra as a 9th grade math intervention, again, for that population of students that we know we've identified as we know that they're going to struggle in Algebra 1. We put them in a 2-period block class offered at all 4 of our high schools. And one of the 2 sections of the 2-period block replaces the 9th grade math elective, but it uses the pre-teach, reteach model of algebra instruction. It's a double dose model of algebra instruction. We also offer Bridge to College Math, which is a 4th year math class for students that struggle in Algebra 2. We know that some students want to continue on their math trajectory, but they may struggle in Algebra 2. And so we offer Bridge to College Math, which gives them those students an opportunity to continue their math trajectory as a 4th year math class and prepare them for college level math. This course also allows students who have not yet met standard on the SBA or met a graduation pathway. Successful completion of the Bridge to College Math course allows them to substitute passing the SBA and meeting one of the required graduation pathways. And the same thing for Bridge to College English. It replaces a traditional senior English course, and it allows students again to meet standard on the SBA in the English Language Arts test or the graduation pathway. And it's an alternative to the traditional senior English course. And the next couple of courses are they're not necessarily interventions. They are courses that we think are important to offer because we believe they provide an opportunity for a student population to take courses that are different from the traditional senior social studies course or the traditional senior English course. So we offer ethnic studies, and we also offer a literature for social justice course that we think are important courses to offer as well. I want to talk really quickly about Graduation Alliance as one of our last interventions, just to share some quick data for all of you on that one. We currently have 50 students enrolled through Graduation Alliance, and these are students who dropped out. These are students that we lost track of. And so Graduation Alliance has reached out and contacted these students. 5 students have graduated since we began the program. 2 more students are expected to graduate at the end of this month, and we have 20 students that are expected to graduate through Graduation Alliance from the Edmonds School District and earn an Edmonds School District diploma at the end of the school year. And interestingly enough, students in Graduation Alliance are also earning credits at a rate of 0.34 credits per month. And a student who takes 1 high school course can earn a 0.5. So earning 0.34 credits a month is a pretty significant rate of credit attainment when students are working toward graduation. So we're really excited about the work the Graduation Alliance has done for our district in terms of really going out and finding those students that we lost track of and bringing them back into the district again. So with all of these interventions in place, we still have a missing population of students that we are we feel we're not serving. And that's the students, I think, that we saw in some of the data that we showed earlier, specifically around math. But this is a population of students that are that group of students that are in the middle. You know, they're struggling, but with some additional support, they might find greater success in high school as well. And this is where we think AVID comes in and helps us to fill that need and that niche for this population of students. And so with that, I believe Dr. Vergara is going to talk a little bit about AVID and give you a little bit more background in the program.
Thank you, Craig. So yes, so AVID or Advanced Via Individual Determination. AVID is a program that was founded in the 1980s by an English teacher from California, and now a few years later, serving more than 2 million students in more than 7,500 schools across the United States and 16 other countries. I go to next slide, please. So here are the characteristics of an AVID student. As Greg mentioned, these AVID courses are pretty much, they're looking at students that are in the middle group between 2 and 3 GPA. Ideally, students often between 2.5 and 3.0 range. The students that are hardworking, students who need some assistance, students that are not getting to that level that they're looking for, that is needed for them to apply for colleges or really think about their careers after high school. And also it's important and bold here that they are showing dedication and determination, okay, determination and in terms of wanting to succeed. Many times first in their family to attend college, and many times ethnic or racial background historically underrepresented in four-year college universities. Next slide, please. So AVID is a program that is actually in elementary, middle, and high schools in many districts across the United States. Right now, we are thinking about AVID and AVID at the secondary level. And why AVID at the secondary level? May I go to next slide, please? I want to connect AVID to our race and equity policy that was adopted in 2017 and really highlight, especially under teaching and learning, the idea of ensuring a positive and academically rigorous school environment that engage each and every student. And that is how I'm connecting our policy with AVID. Also, the next bullet talking about culturally responsive instructional practices and curriculum, and really identifying and eliminating practices that lead to the over or underrepresentation of any student, racial, or ethnic group compared to peers. So the connection again with our race and equity policy. Next slide, please. Why AVID secondary? AVID secondary is used in many schools with the idea of preparing students for college career life, raise the student achievement, really transform the school culture, increase the number of students enrolling high level courses, effectively address key strategies and needs and alignment with key district initiatives and concurrent programs. And I can also share, as a former high school principal, I decided in my previous high school to bring AVID to the high school that I was leading, exactly for these reasons. So I saw the transformation in many of our students going through AVID courses for the 4 years in high school. Next slide, please. As Elizabeth Morgan shared with us, the preparation for success is also helping, not also helping, only helping the students, but also teachers, and teachers the thinking of many times, as Elizabeth shared with us, some teachers or educators are the gatekeepers to advanced classes who did not believe that the average student, the student that we're talking about, deserved the opportunity or could handle the work. So the idea of changing that mindset in terms of our adults, but also students. Next slide, please. So the idea of bringing AVID to Edmond School District is pretty much connected to that preparation for success. So the idea of college ready versus college eligible, right? Really focusing on rigorous courses, not just completing the requirements, also the emphasis in key skills and strategies, like organization, collaboration, critical thinking, and questioning, reading and writing, which in Avid language is called WICOR, W-I-C-O-R strategies. And also the embedded social and emotional skills training. Next slide, please. So what does the data say in terms of Avid data? This is based on 44,000, more than 44,000 students. And it really is telling us that 93% of Avid students completed 4-year college entrance requirement. 78% of them took at least one course of rigor. 30% took college and dual enrollment courses. And again, this is based in 44,000 students. Next slide, please. Also, the same data is telling you that 88% of the students apply, and 79% of them got accepted in a 4-year college. So this is, I want to take you back to our data. So we had 37% of our students, Edmond students, accepted to a 4-year college. Here we have 79% of Avid students accepted. Next slide, please. And then when you look at the national data, and you look at the 4-year degree within 6 years, so you have 42% of Avid students accomplishing that versus 11% at the national level. And then for us, for our data, we had the 43% of the 37% of our students that applied to college obtain a 4-year degree in 8 years. Okay, so again, that was 30% of our students, of that 43%. Here is 42% of that total getting a 4-year degree in 6 years. Next slide, please. So how it works. Really, the idea of Avid strategies and the idea of transforming the classroom. So talks about the access to the rigorous coursework, and also courses and courses that are relevant, inquiry-based, student-centered learning. And also the piece that Avid keeps mentioning is the relationships, and the relationships built among staff and students, and how that really enrich the whole studies and the classroom experiences. If we go to next slide, please. Is Dr. Pedro Noguera shares. He's a distinguished professor from UCLA. Many times we have these federal governments and mandates that is telling us that we need to raise the bar and meet the standards, but they don't tell us how. They don't explain how. And Avid does the how. Avid really provides the support to close the gap. And again, for that, a middle group of students that we serve on a daily basis. Next slide, please. So Avid senior demographics. This is a class of 2017. And the majority of Avid students possess at least one of the following characteristics. So underrepresented race, ethnicity, low socioeconomic status background, or parents have not college experience. So again, the majority of Avid students possess at least one of those characteristics. And Avid students often come from really challenged, disadvantaged background. Next slide, please. Also, I want to connect Avid with the equity piece. And the idea of utilize the data to uncover issues and inform strategies. So really the idea of monitoring rigor, collaboration in a college-going environment, use of compiled data to support district goals, establish high expectations with the scaffolder support. Avid helps students develop the communication skills to self-advocate, to access resources, and really the idea of recognizing and connect with differences. Next slide, please. So I want to connect again the equity piece with this graph, right? And the idea of talking about equality, equity, reality, and liberation. So really providing the appropriate boxes to all our students. For the students who are often the first in the families to attend college and are from groups traditionally, again, underrepresented in higher education. So Avid The idea is for them to, as Avid Secondary, equips teachers and schools with what they need to help these students. Next slide, please. So one part, something that Avid developed is the Avid elective class to really help, and specifically in our students, in the idea of elective class or elective course. So for one period a day, students receive this academic, social and emotional support that will help them succeed in their school more rigorous courses. So how is this, what that means to go and be part of this elective class? So as you see on the right, we have number one, teacher is the one who facilitates the learning. Okay, so Avid teachers design classroom activities to allow students to take the ownership of the content. So the teacher becomes a facilitator, but the students are the ones who take the ownership of the content. And again, the teacher is the one facilitating, creating opportunities for the students to investigate, to talk and explore the content. Also, the college readiness environment. So college banners, posters, and pennants reinforce a college-going culture, and not only in the classroom, but also in the school. Then the inquiry-based activities. So students learn to ask critical questions to clarify their own thinking. High-level thinking, so activities like Socratic seminars, students focus on content, build on each other thoughts, etc. And finally, reading and writing to learn. So students using a variety of texts and really using the Avid's critical thinking strategies and engage in discussions of text along with reflective writing activities. So again, all this is what happens usually in an elective, Avid elective class. Next slide. So again, the elective class is a class that you take every day. And this is a sample week for an Avid elective class. So you will work Monday and Tuesday, for example, with the Avid curriculum. Wednesday and Thursday, you're gonna have tutorials. Tutorials usually are led by volunteers or other staff members. And on Friday, you have different activities. Could be guest speakers, motivational and team building activities, field trips, or binders evaluations. Binders, the binder is connected to the organization piece that Avid promotes. In a curriculum, you have some of the ideas right there. Again, following those weak core strategies, writing, critical thinking, organizational strategies, inquiry and questioning skills, and college and career explorations. And then on the right side, you see some of the activities that are happening during tutorials. Next slide, please. This is a quote from a student, an Avid student, and this Avid student is talking about how now she is in a new path. The idea of taking honor MP courses, she can speak in front of people and not stare at my feet. I can initiate a conversation without being shy or timid. And Avid is giving this student the confidence boost that she needed to be successful in everything that she does. Next slide, please. So the Avid plan for Edmond School District is the following. Year one, the idea is to have 1 or 2 elective classes per school, and the 4 schools mentioned right here: Alderwood Middle School, Meadowdale Middle School, and Linwood and Meadowdale High School. So those will be the 4 schools. And again, having 1 or 2 elective classes. At the middle school level will be 8th grade, at the high school level, 9th grade. And then year 2, 4 additional secondary schools plus 2 elementary schools. As I mentioned earlier, Avid is a K-12 program or intervention. Year 3 will be the another 8 elementary schools. Year 4, 6 elementary schools, and year 5 will be the rest of the schools, 5 elementary plus 4 schools of choice, or the remainder of the schools that we have here in Edmond School District. Next slide, please. In terms of budget implications, here you see the numbers. Year number 1, $60,000, and then keeps going. And really the fee includes the annual Avid membership plus Avid Summer Institute and professional development or professional learning. This case for the first year will be 3-day training for 32 staff members that they are from those 4 schools. Also, the Avid curriculum and programs. Each school gets a secondary library, which includes curriculum, resources, material needed to implement Avid. And this is not only the physical books, but also online resources. And also the Avid district leadership training. So 5 trainings provided to Avid district director to be determined, with tools and skills needed to leverage the Avid college readiness system in the district. So when you look at the big picture. And with that, I believe that is the final slide. Greg, is anything else that I'm missing about Avid?
No, I think at this point, we wanted to throw it open for questions. Yes, Ann.
So we're looking at for year 1, Alderwood Middle, Meadowdale Middle, 1 to 2 electives per middle school. And then at Linwood and Meadowdale, 1 to 2 electives at those. So my question is, how many students is an Avid classroom? How many, is it 20? Is it 15? So how many students would we be looking at to identify during year 1?
Well, usually I can tell you from my experience, usually you get no more than 24 students. So between 22 and 24 students. And then part is because the tutorial piece, you need to divide the students in small groups. So let's say you get 6 tutors and you have groups of 4. Okay, so but the recommendation, at least with my experience, would be no more than 22 or 24 students. And Greg, I believe those are the numbers that we share with principals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Director Noble?
Yeah, I was wondering what the process that went through for, has this been actually selected, and is this something we're going to do, or is this something that's being proposed? And if it's something that's being proposed, what was the selection process this went through? Is this over $500,000 expenditure, which is half of a curriculum adoption? And so what process have we used to determine if this is the best avenue to go, and what were the other alternative programs that you evaluated to see if this is the best?
So to answer the question about there isn't another program like Avid that I think any of us are aware of. Avid is a pretty unique, specifically targeted program for this population of students that we're looking to reach out to. In terms of, I know you mentioned, one of the things you mentioned was the cost, and one of the things that we think is really important to stress is that the cost for Avid, we're actually using Title IV grant dollars, which are an allowable. Avid is an allowable expenditure, that it's a student support and outreach grant that allows us to provide this kind of targeted support for students. So we're using an OSPI grant to cover the cost of this, and it's a grant that renews every year. So we'll have access to those dollars each year. And then the cost for the classes, we are using we're using LAP staffing to cover the cost for the classes. So there isn't going to be a cost to the basic ed staffing for the budgets. But in terms of making the decision about Avid as an intervention, we have made the decision to bring Avid forward and move it in and bring it in, put it into place as an intervention for our secondary schools. Much like the other interventions I discussed earlier, the supports that we offer at the middle schools for literacy and math, the supports that we offer at the high school for credit retrieval and intensified algebra, those are all interventions that we determined based on data that told us that we have a specific need that we have to fill. And Avid is that same kind of program that fills that need based on what data is telling us about this middle population of students that right now we have no interventions or supports for. So using the same model of how we've determined other interventions that are secondary schools, we've decided to move forward with Avid.
Director Clams?
So the description of Avid to me is the description. So I need to figure out what makes this different than our just expecting our teachers to be doing inquiry-based learning and critical thinking and having small group discussions? Is some of this technology-based or is it paper-based? Is the curriculum that's given to the teachers very specific, like day by day? I'm trying to figure out what makes this different than just good instruction.
Yeah, and Director Kadims, you're totally right. This is nothing new. I think it's more about the expectation, accountability, and the culture that you create in your school. Having Avid is embedded in your system. So we talk a lot about the elective class, but also in my own experience, I can tell you as a principal that we decided to embed all these the strategies, right, and in every single classroom. So it was an expectation for teachers to use those strategies, and also it was easy for students to go from one class to another, or from one teacher to another, and take notes the same way, or use those inquiry strategies the same way, or etc. So it becomes a culture, I want to say. So it really gives you that extra layer of support in terms of hold ourselves as adults accountable, but also for the students understand this is how aligned we are. This is the what you need to expect in each of the classrooms, and we're providing the tools, consistent tools across the classroom, so you can be successful with any content that you're taking in our schools.
But a kid takes like one of these, and only the teachers who are teaching the specific ADVID class are given the training. So I don't know how we would get a culture across all of a whole school unless a whole school went AVID wise. And it looked from the timeline that we're starting at secondary and then moving down to elementary. And I'm thinking, would this be the same group of kids? I mean, with something like this, should we start at elementary? I realize maybe secondary is needier. I don't know, but if we're gonna be bringing it down to elementary, does that mean a kid who starts at AVID in elementary then does an AVID class every year, so there's some sort of continuum? Or I'm just really having difficulty picturing what this is and how it fits into the bigger picture. And it's not just a one-off, that a kid gets this one great experience and the rest of the courses look traditional.
So most districts that are our size of our demographics have AVID. And I know Everett, talking to their superintendent recently, he has it at all high schools. I had it at all high schools in Eugene, Oregon. It's a pretty standard practice. You see systems that have a lot of need for students. And to answer your questions, Director Kadims, I was moving to AVID for all at the elementary level. So you start with a high school and you go AVID for all. So you provide that opportunity for all kids to be able to learn those skill sets that have alignment in the system as well. It's a specific way to take notes, for example, which makes a lot of sense when you look at it. That way it's consistent from elementary to middle to high school, but also their experience in terms of public speaking and understanding these skill sets. So it is at the elementary level, it's AVID for all. At the secondary, it's more targeted for specific students that need additional supports, and they do create a culture of it's almost like a professional learning community for kids. So that's something that's there. If you look at AVID and in terms of who has it around the region, you'll find that it's targeted to kids that we won't see our junior and senior year sometimes in our high schools. They just aren't there. So I think that's one of the pluses. This is an intervention for our high school kids because, again, I know with our best efforts, our graduation rates have flatlined here, and we're trying to reach the kids who we feel need that additional support, that extra push at our secondary schools to get them across that finish line their senior year. So that's the purpose for AVID.
So does this mean, Dr. Balderas, does this mean that an 8th grader takes one AVID class as part of their schedule, and then that's an AVID student, and they take an AVID class as a 9th grader and as a 10th grader and as an 11th grader and as a 12th grader. Is
Cohort.
that,
It's a cohort group.
it's a cohort.
The high school.
So they would, and at elementary, it would be all elementary teachers would be trained, and a part of the day would be teaching these what are called AVID strategies to the kids, and that would mean at every grade level that would be happening. So a kid starting at kindergarten would have AVID built in, and first and second and I'm trying to understand from a kid's perspective, you know, not here's a class and here's a class, but I'm a kid. What does that mean? Does it mean I take one AVID class? Does it mean I take it that class every year? I'm trying to understand that.
Yeah, so
what the long-term goal is.
Yeah, so a student, let's talk, for example, one of the key components of AVID, when you think about the AVID elective, is the organization piece, okay? So for example, let's talk about students at the elementary level. They're gonna be, the teacher, the elective teacher or the AVID teacher will help them to be organized. So what AVID suggests usually is that they have a binder that is divided by all the classes, and they have all the paperwork and assignments and everything is organized that. So then the AVID teacher checks on student binder once a week, like usually on Fridays. So in terms of, okay, so show me your math section. Do you have everything that you need to do your homework? Do you have your assignments, etc.? So then they go class by class. So then the student, it really creates a culture. So the student is organized. By the time that they get to the middle school and the high school, they already know how to be organized. The same thing with the idea of taking notes. So I'm gonna learn how to take notes, right? And then I'm gonna use the strategy in every single class that I take. And before Director Katims, when I was talking about the professional development, you're exactly right. We have elective teachers that they're gonna go and get that specific professional development. But the idea when I say creating the culture is hopefully you have the space and the time to talk about how to take notes with all your staff, because this AVID and how to be organized with all your staff. So it's how you create that culture, not necessarily only attending PD. Hopefully, right, you have more teachers and more, depending upon funding, that you can send more teachers to, they have online PD or in-person PD, but the idea again is how you create a culture, and AVID becomes part of your culture in your school. So it's not just for right one elective class.
So when you talk about at elementary, the AVID teacher, is that not the kid's regular classroom teacher? Is
Correct.
it some?
No,
so is
it
it
is.
It is the regular classroom
Yes,
teacher.
it is a regular classroom teachers that they will get that specific professional development.
So that, and you refer to the professional development as being online. So does that mean, is it specific, is it customized for different grade level teachers, or is it one, like no matter what grade you teach, this is, you know, the general approach?
So they talk about the summer learning, which is actually specifically and customized to grade level and also to schools. So they recommend that the whole team. So let's say this summer that is coming, if we send six staff members from Meadowdale High School, then the idea is for all of them to go together as a group, as a team, because they learn. It's 3-day training, and I have done this 3 years. 3 years of this training. So the first 2 years, you really go to different sessions, and the idea is for you to start learning about how to teach those specific strategies to your students. And then the third day, you plan with your team about not only the elective class, but also how your approach when you look at the school, right? And when your approach with all your staff, including teachers and classified staff that are helping kids. Because the idea again is that this becomes a culture. Okay, this is the way how we're gonna take notes. This is the way how our students are going to be organized, right? And then you see that more and more. And again, we have these cohorts, but again, from my own experience, I can tell you that it's really replicates pretty quickly because they're good strategies. So then other students are wanting to do it. Oh, my friend is an avid elective, but I like the way how she or he is taking notes, or the way how he's organized. So I want to do the same thing, right? So it's how really it starts expanding across the grade levels and the students.
And I'm not sure if, and I've had trouble with my internet going in and out, and I was kicked out for a while. So I may be asking something that was actually answered. But I think Gary asked, and I don't know, I don't recall hearing the answer. Is this a decision that's already been made and the money's been set aside and the teachers have been identified? Is that correct?
Yeah, we've identified the funding source. Again, I mentioned it was a Title IV grant that's going to cover the cost of AVID, and the staffing costs will be covered out of LAP. And then the buildings have been working to, the buildings we've identified have been working to identify their AVID teams within their buildings.
So I know there's been a lot of concern. We received a lot of emails and messages from staff, particularly staff of elective classes, who are concerned and have talked about that in places where AVID has been implemented, the number of kids then who are able to take their electives decreases and results in a loss of staff. Is this something that is anticipated in our district as a result of our implementing it?
Well, I guess Director Kadams, I would answer that question by saying that we already implement interventions that pull kids out of electives. And this is so, this practice is not new. And we've been doing it for, that whole list of interventions that I provided for you a couple of slides earlier. Those were all interventions that we've identified that we need to implement as a system. And again, it's hard to answer that question because we don't know what the numbers will be right now. We've identified potentially 2 sections of students at a maximum of 2 sections of students that the schools were implementing AVID in. So potentially 40, 45 or so students that are going to be identified as AVID students. So I think I don't know that we can answer that question today, but again, I guess my question is, do we not provide interventions for this particular group of students who we've identified, and we have data to show that there's disproportionality and all those things that we're trying to address. And so do we, it becomes a really, we need to do both. And I think it's not an either or, it's an and I think the question now becomes, how do we do this and maintain, solid electives? I've talked talked at length before about the need to do something else with our 6-period day. That's a system issue that we've got to solve. And we probably wouldn't be having this conversation if we were able to address the 6-period day issue. So that's still something that's out in front of us that we need to fix as well, because we need to create more opportunities for students to be able to take courses. I'm a firm believer in kids being able to do everything they want to do. And we need to make it possible for them to. But at the same time, we also have a responsibility to provide interventions for students that we know, based on what data is telling us, need support. And so those are the kinds of decisions that we have to make. And so I don't know. I think I just I don't want to editorialize too much more, but I think that I think we have to find a way to do both.
And I absolutely believe we have to serve all the kids to help them all be successful. But there's a whole list of interventions we've been doing, and our graduation rate has not gone up, but we're continuing to do them. So what I would hope is that we do a more careful job of evaluating what interventions are working and what are not. And that would have to be true for AVID as well. So I'm wondering, are we signing a multi-year contract with them? Or is this something where it's year by year, where we can be looking at the data? And this says my internet is, are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, okay.
And
I keep getting these messages. I'm completely empathizing with kids in classes when their internet goes out, because this has been happening to me. But we need a strong evaluation plan for something like this, it's going to be taking that amount of money every year, and that we're planning to implement, across all our, to know, is this working? Because if it is, that's great. And I absolutely believe kids need to learn how to study and take notes. My kids didn't know how to, and nobody taught them how to. And one of them struggled until he hit college and then had to teach himself. The other one was in IB and was sort of forced in IB to do it. But kids are not taught that, and they need to be. So I have no problem with the goals of this program, but I want to make sure that as we implement it, we closely evaluate it, as well as the other. I had wanted to earlier ask, but then I got kicked off completely. I don't know if you like meeting for what seemed like 5 minutes, but anyway, when we talk about math support or intensive algebra or anything that has a double period, I remember in the past when we did data studies on those, that we did not see consistent positive results, but they were very dependent on the excellence of the teacher. So when a teacher was really good, it worked really well. Also, when there was, and you referred to several interventions as support classes, when we had support classes and they weren't being taught by the same teacher who was teaching the basic class, without coordination, those were definitely not worth the kids' time to be in that second class. So these are the kind of things that I would like to see, maybe a more complete report of how are the current interventions that we've done for many years working, and how much do they cost, and whose needs are being met, and should we continue doing those? Or maybe we should put many more resources into Abbott. I don't know. But I'd like us to be making these decisions based on data, particularly when we've had long-term interventions in place, but our data hadn't been getting better.
And Director Williams, I can tell you about going back to your original question. So this is not a multi-year contract. This is 1 year by year. And for sure, I totally agree that we're gonna look at data, we're gonna track this group of students, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping that we're gonna see what I saw in my high school when I was a principal for 4 years, and I saw an amazing growth and that middle group of my students, and going from 2.0 to 3.0 and above. So I'm hoping that we're gonna see the same type of data here. But our commitment is that we're gonna show with the board and the public how our kids are doing, the students that are taking AVID classes, and they're part of the AVID program.
So just quickly looking at the snapshot from Washington State here, local state data from, this is from a couple, 2-3 years ago. This is from 17-18. So roughly 90 districts in the state of Washington, 43,000 kids. 52% of those kids were on free reduced meals. Demographics, 45% white, 32% Latino, 13% other, 5% Black, 5% Asian. 99% of those kids graduated from high school in 17-18 from Washington schools. And there's a quote from my friend Steve Webb, previous superintendent of Vancouver, who also promoted AVID. So again, to your point, this is research based, and we want to make sure that we're targeting the right kids. And to your point, Director Kadams, we've had that discussion about program evaluation with staff, as a staff, in terms of how do we do that in the future to ensure that we are having a solid return on investment for what we do. And I call it weeding the garden. So we need to weed the garden in terms of what's working well, and keeping what's working well, and revisiting things that aren't working well. Because sometimes there's things that aren't working well in school systems. It's about the implementation sometimes. So how did we implement, and how is it being done? So very well aware of the need for program evaluation, and also looking at again, the return on investment of what we are doing. Absolutely agree with you. So look forward to that, to the future, in terms of looking at data to really drive or inform decision making, having data informed decision making, and what we keep and what we don't keep. Because
And I have one more question that's right in line with that.
Please.
So since we're going to be using LAP funds for this, does that mean that there are certain LAP programs or LAP kids that would have been served that aren't going to be served because the money's being moved to support AVID? Or will the kids who've been being served through LAP money continue to be served in some way, even though they don't tend to fit, I don't think, into your like description of the middle kids? They tend to be lower achieving kids. So I'm wondering, is this pulling money from, what is it, from Peter to give to Paul or whatever the phrase is?
I knew what you meant. Well, I think we need to figure out who the kids are first that are identified for AVID, and we also know that the need for those LAP students that are being supported right now with current LAP dollars isn't going to go away. So we also need to figure out how we're going to do that, and that's what we're working to identify LAP resources right now to see what we have and what we can do. But at the secondary schools, for example, our LAP resources are being used partly to fund the credit retrieval courses that I talked about earlier. But in working with Dr. Balderas, and we think we've identified the ability to use ESSER funds to do credit retrieval. It fits within that, so we'll be able to maintain a credit retrieval model at the high schools, but shift some of those funds, so we'll be able to do both. Both support those students that need it through credit retrieval, and then also support students in AVID using LAP funds. So those are just some of the examples of things that we're going to continue to try to do to help support kids.
Okay. The ESSER money though is only for 2 years. So
it goes away. So, but at that point, we hope that we'll identify other funding sources. We also, I mentioned before, the Title IV grant that covers the cost of AVID. That's another funding source that we can continue to use as well, because that not only does the Title IV grant allow us to pay for the cost of AVID, we can also use that grant, which is renewable every year, to cover some of the staffing costs that'll come with it as well.
Director McMurray, I know you've been trying to get a question in.
I'm wondering, Dr. Vergara, Dr. Balderas, you both say that you have implemented AVID at the high school level in your previous districts. My question is, can you give me from your personal experience what the improvement was, and also how long did it take? In other words, is this something that you need to be able to stick with it for a number of years for you to be able to see the fruit of what it is you're doing? And then for Greg, you mentioned that Everett, or Dr. Balderas, maybe you mentioned that Everett is doing, has had AVID. They have always had a higher on-time graduation rate than us. So my question is, in your discussions with Everett, do they, I know that they have a Graduation Alliance as well that Greg has attributed to, they've had success in increasing their graduation rates. Would they also, how long have they had AVID, and what has been their experience, if you know it?
I can speak to my conversations with the superintendent, Ian Salzman, in Everett. He says that he's a strong believer in Everett as well, and it's making a difference. I can give more details when I'm talking to Dr. Salzman in Everett. But my experiences back in my previous district, it was previously just a high school model when I first arrived, and we started targeting specific most in need in terms of the demographics and the poverty level of middle schools. And then we started, again, framing out the middle schools, and then we started targeting specific elementary schools where we want to do AVID for all. So it's if you want to do it that way, it's one model. Another model, just again, stay with the high school and just making sure you target kids coming in to make sure you help them cross the finish line. I think it just depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what other resources and what other supports a student has throughout their educational experience that we provide here in district. So there's some systems that have a lot more supports and some that do not. And the average, and I tell you right now that one of the most joyous things that I was able to attend were AVID graduations of the kids that actually crossed the finish line, and they had their own special graduation on top of their regular graduation. And these are kids that these are the kids that were truly struggling their freshman, sophomore years, and the stories that they told personally to their parents in the audience were really, I mean, they're really powerful stories. So I hope to be able to get there, because I think all our kids deserve, we all know what they deserve, but I think the question is, you know, are we maximizing the resources currently in our current system, as Dr. Kadam stated, and targeting dollars the right way? I think that's the ultimate question I think that the board's asking right now is, are we really focusing, and are we weeding that garden? Are we doing that program evaluation that's needed to ensure that we're spending money where it needs to be spent? And I think AVID, from my perspective, is one of these programs that does make a difference for kids, in my experience. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Vergara, who also has experience.
Yeah, and I you know, and this is not going to, I mean, we need to implement it, and it's gonna take some time. But following Dr. Valdera's comments, I saw firsthand how a specific group of students were actually needing the space and the time to really develop those writing skills, those how to take notes, how to be organized. And many times what I saw is that they were just needing the time. They were just needing the time with an adult and establishing those relationships, really talking about college, talking about opportunities after high school, really meant the mentoring piece. So that was provided, the access to tutors, having 2 times a day, I mean, 2 times a week, a tutor coming and work in small groups and really not giving me the answers, but guiding me. So because I'm owning this content. So, and really I share with you a quote from one of the students, really the idea of the confidence boost, right? That they need to get to that next level. I saw them, several AVID students before AVID, they didn't even knew that college is a thing for me. I don't know if I can really get into 4-year college. I don't know if I remember one kid telling me, I don't know if I'm college material. But then after going through this, I mean, it was just amazing. And one thing that I want to tell you, AVID recommends that the students, at least at the high school, they go through the 4 years. And they, as Dr. Valderas mentioned, they graduate from AVID. And that also opens many doors at the college level when they are applying for college and they need to build up on their resume and their experiences. But many stories, I can tell you many stories also about kids, how they really succeed and they got to that next level in their education because of it. So that's my experience. And I'm sorry, Director McMurray, your question, it was multiple questions. I'm not sure you were answering.
No, that's good. I just wanted to know what your personal experience was and kind of how long, you know, you need to, if you're going to implement something and determine whether it's effective, you have to give it the time that it needs to be able to determine it. If you try to evaluate too early, well, then it's never going to do what you want. So it sounds to me, at least from your perspective, from your experience, we need to, if we start this in 8th grade, we need to at least do the 5 years for 8th grade through 12th grade to make sure that that cohort that's established in 8th grade is able to work its way through the high school system. And then we should be able to see increased graduation rates. And Dr. Balderas, did you say that of the 90 school districts in Washington State that represented 43,000 AVID students, that the AVID students had a 99% high school graduation rate?
That's correct. I can send you that. I just pulled it quickly from online. So, and
okay, thank you.
And also, I think also it's to your point in terms of how we determine it's on track, being on track by grade level. So 9th, 10th, 11th grade, making sure that they're on track to graduate. So that's another way that we can also look at how's it working for kids. Is we continually monitor. We need to look at data always, and with our students is making sure that they're on track to graduate by grade and even by semester. We can do that.
And for sure you're gonna
Curious.
see the. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd be curious to know what the graduation rate is for this cohort of kids, similar kids who meet these criteria who haven't been in AVID in our district, because I think our kids who tend not to graduate have lower GPAs than the ones, than 2.5 or so. So I'd just be really curious what the equivalent graduation rate would be for control group, of kids in the past that would have fit that AVID profile of who you'd put in, and then see, how well did they do?
Yeah, no, I agree in terms of just what that looks like. The 2.25 to 3.25 kid, that's right there. And again, it's just looking at national data, the graduation rate is much higher. But locally, I can maybe ask superintendents that currently have kids in AVID locally in other districts that are like us.
Well, thank you for the informative report. I look forward to hearing more about how it goes. And my 2 cents are that I'm really looking forward to what I think is a culture of opportunity, perhaps, that this would instill. Especially, I'll be interested to hear how it's implemented across elementary schools. And I see, Isabella, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I just really quickly like to add that I actually went to a middle school that was like full AVID. I wasn't in the AVID program, like I didn't take the AVID classes, but I did use a lot of the like the note taking and the binder and everything. I did that also, even though I wasn't in the class. But the kids, my peers that were in the class, they did really benefit from it. And obviously not every single kid, didn't work for every single kid, but it did work for a lot of them. So it was really great to see.
Thank you for sharing your experience. And thank you again. And we'll continue the conversation. Okay. Next, we have some unfinished business. Our first item is the second reading to adopt new policy 6340 debt management. Do I hear a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt new policy 6340 debt management. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the policy is approved. Next, we have a second reading to adopt revised policy 3414 infectious diseases. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the revised policy 3414.
I
This is
second.
Ann.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt revised policy 3414. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes and the policy 3414, the revised policy, is approved. Next, we have a second reading to adopt revised policy 3143, notification and dissemination of information about student offenses and notification of threats of violence or harm. Do I hear a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
I
I
second.
second.
It's been moved and seconded to adopt revised policy 3143. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Uh,
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes, and the revised policy 3143 is adopted. Next, we have new business, a single reading to approve resolution number 21-11, emergency waiver of high school graduation credits. Do I hear a motion?
I move to approve.
This is Ann, seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to approve resolution 21-11, emergency waiver of high school graduation credits. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore,
Aye, and the motion passes, the resolution passes. Next, we have a single reading to approve the bid award to Guitar Center / Music and Arts for musical instruments. Do I hear a motion?
This is Ann, move to approve.
I
I
second
second it.
that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the bid award to Guitar Center Music and Arts for musical instruments. Is there any discussion?
I have a question, and I'm not sure Scott Barnes is here, so I don't know if maybe Dr. Balderas knows this, but I'm a huge fan. I'm a former band mom. But are these instruments for kids who can't afford to buy their own instruments? Is that what the inventory is for? I'm just trying to understand exactly the use of this, the inventory of musical instruments in the district.
I can speak to this, Dr. Kadams. So one of the things that we've had on our list of big purchases for some time is replacing some of the large instruments that you'll find in our various ensembles, right? So when we get a new school, we're able to include the purchase of things like a xylophone set or a huge timpani or those kinds of things in the capital expenditure, but those wear out over time, right? So we've had on our wish list for some time replacing some of those large instruments. So this is to take a bite out of that need that we have around the system. So I had the detailed document, but I closed it some time ago. So I can't speak to like what Linwood High School needs, but there are needs at most of our secondary schools for some of those large instruments. And so because of the price point, it needed to go out for bid.
I get it. So these are like the kind of instruments that a kid wouldn't have of their own. But they're
Right.
they're part
These
of
are
the
things.
schools. They're like, you don't move them around from place to place. They're kind of sit at the school.
Right. And, you know, just because you asked, we do have an extensive supply. Well, I don't know if I call it extensive. We have an ample supply of instruments on hand to provide to students that are unable to get them on their own. And so
Okay, good.
we have quite a bit in store, mostly serving our students in 5th and 6th grade band and orchestra, you know, because after the students commit, they tend to want their own instrument. But we do have quite a supply through donations and various things that Scott and his team manages.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob.
Sure.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, then I'll call for a roll call vote, please.
Director McMurray,
Aye.
Director Noble,
Aye.
Director Kadams,
Aye.
Director Kilgore.
Aye, and the motion passes and the award is approved. Next, we have a first reading with no action to adopt revised policy 6000, program planning, budget preparation, adoption, and implementation. Do I hear a motion? Oh, we don't have a motion. I'm sorry. Is there any discussion or any questions?
Yeah, my question is just why the one revision is in there, why you took out the one line about no involuntary deductions may be made. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of that line being in there originally, and why are we removing it?
So when I studied, it was one of those that is being recommended by WASDA for update. So when I studied the policy change in the one line, it appears that instead of stating that we will only take deductions basically as authorized by law, they took the sentence out and then just quoted all the laws that pertain to employee deductions instead. It makes it a little bit longer, but that was the change.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, hearing no further discussion. Oh, we'll move on. I'm sorry, I'm still in voting mode. Next, we have a first reading with no action to adopt revised policy 3418, response to student injury or illness. Is there any discussion, any questions or comments? Okay, moving on. Next, we have a first reading with no action to adopt revised policy, board policy 6512, infection control program. Are there any discussion, questions, or comments? Okay. Going once. Great. Now we move on to our board member comments. Let me ask the students who are left if we can have bring back the other screen. Oh, thank you. So I can see who's here. Kai, do you have anything you'd like to tell us?
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for your hard work. It's going to finally pay off with schools reopening, and I hope everything goes smoothly for secondary reopening starting Monday. So thank you.
Thank you. Isabella?
Yeah, I agree. And I really loved all the presentations. They were very informational, and it's really great to know those numbers of the students in like certain classes, or like, yeah, just students. Like I feel bad saying this, but I haven't thought of it as much. And it really is an important thing that we need to note. And yeah, I'm really excited to go back to the hybrid model and hopefully get back to normal pretty soon. So thank you.
Thank you. Soralia?
I'm very thankful for the board and all the staff for their efforts to bring us back to hybrid. I'm really excited and I hope it goes well for everyone.
Oh, thank you. Vandana?
Yeah, it was lovely to hear about how the district is doing in bringing kids back, and I'm really excited to hear about as we open more and more grades up and students up. I'm excited to see how that will turn out, and overall it was a really informative meeting.
Thank you. Ratika, are you still on?
Yes. Let's see if my internet actually decides to work with me today. So I think we're all excited for a sense of normalcy. It's been a long time coming, and it's definitely going to be some interesting adventures going down the road. I did want to mention the presentation from earlier with the disproportionality. I can't say that word for the life of me, but I think across the board, I've done so much reading on that and just trying to educate myself. And I think as many of us have in these times, and across the country, the disproportion in math, especially, but you talk about 7th grade kind of being the time when we go forward and kind of set students up. And the earlier you start people off in this opportunity to reach higher and to have the things they need to be able to succeed and reach higher, the better off we're going to be. And I mean, from a young age, I really learned that I had to advocate for myself for those kinds of things when I had situations that could potentially hold me back. But I know that that's not the case for a lot of students who don't really even know the opportunities that are available for them and the situations that they're put in where they don't have the opportunity to learn things like what the AVID program was talking about earlier with the note taking and just essential things that we don't really think about being necessary, but that are actually extremely necessary. And just having that program and target towards those people is really important. And I think I'm just glad that conversation is happening and that we're taking leaps forward to kind of deal with those inequities, because more and more those inequities are going to come up with as much as the pandemic has, as many problems as the pandemic has caused. But thanks to everyone for their work, as everyone else said.
Thank you. Director Noble.
Yeah, well, first of all, I'd like to thank for the disproportionality data. Even though there was some confusion as to how it was presented, the main story is still so true when you look at the data. And now we're looking at it in middle school of kids taking advanced math courses. It just validates the issues that we've had in high school and with graduation rates. And looking back at that point, I think it's just really valid to look at it. And I think there's some very valuable information we can get out of that. My second comment is on the AVID program. It just sounds like a fantastic thing. I know I questioned at the beginning its cost, but I think it's a great program. And the fact that we're implementing it from the high school down instead of from primary up is always such a good idea, because when you start at the bottom and implement it up, you're chasing kids all the way, and some kids, it never catches up with some kids. But when you start at the top and move it down, then every kid, it basically intersects every kid on their way up. So it's, I think it's going to be a great program. So I appreciate the work that's been done to find that. And that's about all I have to comment.
Thank you. Director McMurray.
Well, I would just say thank you for the presentations, and I'm really pleased to see the emphasis shifting to data-driven decisions and to really watching that so that we can evaluate, like Director Kadam said, really evaluate what are the outcomes and move the resources to those programs that are producing the best outcomes for our kids. I also, driving around and just walking around my neighborhood this week, I love seeing the school buses back on the roads. There's something about it that it makes me feel like maybe we're coming out of this, and it just gives me a sense of hope. So I'm really pleased. I was pleased to see the number of school bus drivers that were able to recall and get back into service. Thank them for their perseverance and their patience during this time. And it's just fantastic to see them. And just lastly, I wanted to mention once again, Mountlake Terrace High School, the journalism program there with Vince DeMiro, that Mountlake Terrace High School was once again honored with an official announcement of the First Amendment Press Freedom Award for their spring virtual convention. And Nathaniel Reyes, who was the junior web manager, got an excellent. This just continues a pattern of really exemplary work year after year after year at Mountlake Terrace High School. And I'm thrilled that in all of the challenges that our high school programs continue and our students continue to put in the work and the effort to achieve at excellent levels with all of the pressure on them from other things like pandemics. So congratulations to them, and it's really, really great to see that tradition continue.
Thank you. Director Kadams.
I want to really acknowledge everyone that's been a part of making this week and next week possible for bringing our kids back. I mean, this is really the perfect example of it takes a village. So starting with the teachers who've all had to pivot, and again, all of the building administrators and building staff, all of the support staff, all of the district administrators. I can't even imagine the amount of work that's been going on to make this happen. So when those kids come to that front door, it's all working. I want to acknowledge the families. It's interesting that close to 2/3 of our kids have opted to come back in person. And so that tells me that this is really meeting an important need, even though it's not for very many weeks left, but it's at least for enough that it should make a difference. And so I think it's amazing that we're actually able to give this opportunity to all our kids to spend some time in buildings before the end of the school year. I also really want to thank the students on our board. I know we regularly do, but guys, you don't know how great it is to hear your voices. And when these issues and concerns and topics come up, that we can turn to you and say, what do you think? Or just hear it from your perspective. So I really thank those of you who come every week and are on here till the end, because you know you have homework, you're working hard, you're trying to get your sleep. And I just want you to know how much you're appreciated, because student voice is so important, and you're here to help us and give us your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I am, of course, so pleased on not only a professional but a personal level that we're getting our kids back to school. And I'm really looking forward to next week driving my kid to school. The one comment that I was really intrigued by when Dr. Vergara was describing how a student said they didn't think they were college material. This really speaks my language of, you know, so much of who we are as learners, it begins with our identity, our sense of ourselves, and what we believe in about ourselves. And that is the key to unlocking that learner is for them to believe that they can do it. So I'm really looking forward to hearing some of these stories, and to piggyback onto Director Kadam's comments about our student advisors. I also, of course, really appreciate your input, and I hope that as you have experienced this time advising the board, you are also seeing yourselves as leaders and as people who have really important voices in what we're doing here. So I really appreciate your perspective on these, as it turns out, pretty complex decisions we're making, and these fast ones. So keep it up. Thank you so much. And finally, Dr. Balderas, who says education and the district can't move fast? We've raised the bar. So I'm as everyone has said, I'm so appreciative of all the work that everyone's done, and continue, look forward to brighter skies and more opportunities for our kids in the future. So thank you. And that wraps it up for me. And Dr. Balderas?
Thank you. And I'll be quick as well. I think the board's covered everything. And I really want to appreciate the staff that are on the call and all the staff at the EAC who help support schools this week. So it's really been an all hands on deck. It's been a Team Edmonds approach that we've had every department out helping schools of attestation just to have another body. And spoke with the principal today that was just said, they were so thankful just to have an extra body. There was an administrator from the district office just to help support to be a runner. So, and we're going to continue to do that next week. And I encourage the board, if you have time to roam around and just pop in to just see how it's going. You don't have to help, just see how it's how kids are being unloaded and that way from your perspective, because you can see how well it's working and where there's some gaps, and there will be gaps. I'll be the first one to admit, but we'll work through those. And kids are resilient. Kids just want to be on campus, and I appreciate all the educators, all the staff that made this possible. And I truly think, as Dr. Kilgore said, the way we finish will be the way we start next year a bit. It's going to be, and just getting kids on campus is the way we finish the year, may be how we start the next year. So getting our kids used to a process procedure, one way in, one way out type of scenarios. If you see our campuses with our lines, it's good training for our kiddos. So, and to the point that Dr. Kilgore stated, it's, helping kids through our coursework, through our programming to make them having be more resilient, having more grit, those process skills, those soft skills. It's about engagement of kids. So I think that's the work that needs to continue, the work that's been done already. We do have great programs here in Edmonds. Well, it's one of the keys to student engagement is finding what makes a kid tick and make a kid stay with it. I think that the stay withedness, as you stated, in terms of the persistent, I think that's what we need to make sure that we identify so that we can have every kid define their own success in an Edmonds school district. And that's our goal, have every student define their own success. So when they leave us, they have the skill sets that we have provided during all of their time in Edmonds to be able to help them be successful in whatever they choose to do. Because not everybody's going to go to the 4-year. Not everybody wants to go to the 4-year, but to have them have their success. So I look forward to the work ahead. But I look forward to next week. I look forward to the rest of this week, and I encourage board members, just to, maybe view from afar if you feel comfortable, just to pop in to schools and just to see how it's going. So thank you, and appreciate the conversations this evening. So thank you.
And with that, meeting adjourned.